My sister demanded I babysit her 4 kids on New Year's Eve while they enjoyed the trip I was paying for. My parents sided with her, so I canceled all the travel plans and watched them go nuclear. Hey Reddit. So, I was standing in my doorway, staring at $38,000 worth of destruction. My sister did this after I refused to babysit her minions and canceled the trip I was paying for. But let me back up. This disaster started 4 months ago with a text. Name's Damon, 31 male. My phone buzzed during a client meeting. Family group chat. Sister Chelsea throwing out her latest demand like it was totally reasonable. Damon, Lake Tahoe for New Year's is happening. Cannot wait. Quick heads up. Need you to watch the kids New Year's Eve while Eric and I do the countdown dinner cruise. Like 7 to 8 hours tops. Thanks. I stared at that message. 7 to 8 hours. 4 kids. Ages 9, 7, 4, and 14 months. Connor's in his insufferable phase where he argues about everything. Sophie talks nonstop. Owen's basically a disaster with legs. And Chelsea wanted me to handle that circus alone on New Year's Eve while she and Eric partied on a cruise. I work enterprise sales. 60-hour weeks. High pressure. I hadn't taken time off in 9 months. Lake Tahoe was supposed to be my reset button, not an unpaid babysitting gig. Typed back quickly. Not really planning to spend New Year's doing childcare. Coming to relax. The dots bounced for a solid minute. When her response came through, I could tell she was pissed. Wow. Okay then. Nice to know where we all stand. Family supports family, but I guess that doesn't apply to everyone. Mom jumped in before I could respond. Susan's always making excuses for Chelsea's nonsense. Sweetheart, it's only a few hours. Your sister and Eric never get alone time with 4 kids. Never get alone time. They'd been in Napa Valley 3 weeks ago posting Instagram stories. But sure, they're so deprived. Mom, I'm using vacation days for this. I'd actually like to enjoy New Year's. Dad joined the party. Your sister contributes a lot to this family. Helping out for one evening is the least you can do. That's rich. I paid for their 25th anniversary trip to Hawaii. $7,000. Bailed Dad out twice when his business tanked. Covered Chelsea's car repairs when Eric was between jobs. But yeah, I'm the one not pulling my weight. Then, Chelsea sent this. You know what? If spending time with your nieces and nephew isn't important enough to you, maybe just don't come. We don't need someone who can't be bothered ruining everyone's good time. I read it 3 times. Babysit or you're uninvited. After everything I'd done for this family, this was the thanks I got. Stayed cold in my response. Just making sure I understand. You're uninviting me from New Year's because I won't babysit. If you're going to be selfish about it, yeah. That's when I realized what was actually happening. I pulled up my laptop and started checking receipts. 4 months of planning. Chelsea had picked this premium resort on Lake Tahoe's North Shore. The kind of place that books up a year in advance. She'd sent the link with her usual breezy entitlement. Let's make this New Year's epic. What she conveniently skipped mentioning was that she expected everyone else to fund her family's portion. My Q4 commission had been solid, so I'd volunteered to cover things. Be the good brother and make it special for everyone. I'd booked their 3-bedroom lakeside cabin, paid for ski rentals, covered Eric's snowboard gear, fronted half their airfare, pulled up the credit card statements and did the math. Total, $22,570. $22,000. And now she was holding the whole trip hostage unless I agreed to be her free nanny. My phone buzzed. Another group message from Chelsea. Since certain people apparently can't be team players, maybe we should rethink who's actually committed to making this trip happen. That was it. I opened the resort website and checked their cancellation policy. Full refund within 5 days. I had 3 days left, so I canceled the cabin. Confirmation email came back instantly. Canceled the ski rentals. Done. Snowboard gear. Gone. Sent an email about the airfare money no longer being available. Then I opened the family group chat and typed out my response. Chelsea, message received loud and clear. If I'm not welcome unless I provide free labor, I respect that. However, need to inform everyone I've canceled the arrangements I paid for. Lakeside cabin for your family. $11,200. Ski and snowboard gear rentals. $2,850. Half your family's airfare. $8,523.48. I've also canceled my own reservations. Guess my $22,500 wasn't invited to New Year's either. Enjoy. Hit send. My phone started exploding before I even set it down. Chelsea called 7 times in 2 minutes. Declined everyone. Her text came through in all caps. What the heck did you just do, you maniac? Why would you do this to me? Screw you! Mom's message popped up next. This is completely insane. Call me this now. Dad kept it short. Unacceptable. Fix this immediately. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb, grabbed a drink, and put my feet up. And honestly, I felt amazing. The next morning, I woke up to 51 missed calls, over 130 texts, made breakfast, and scrolled through the chaos. Chelsea's messages went from fury to full-blown panic. She'd called the resort. Everything was confirmed canceled. New Year's week at Tahoe doesn't have last-minute openings. She was screwed, and she knew it. You just destroyed New Year's for 4 innocent children. You're a monster. This was supposed to be special. We can't afford to rebook any of this. Mom and Dad are devastated. Hope destroying your family was worth it, you selfish piece of trash. Selfish piece of trash. Remember that phrase. It comes back later. Mom's messages were classic guilt trips. Please, sweetheart. This went completely out of control. We need to discuss this like rational adults. Your father and I are heartbroken. Chelsea is having a breakdown. Those poor children don't understand why their uncle hates them. Dad went short and aggressive. Your behavior is reprehensible. You will apologize and rectify this immediately. I won't tolerate this vindictive nonsense. Finished breakfast. Felt lighter than I had in years. My neighbor Larry chose that exact moment to knock. Larry's this retired guy who's lived next door for 3 years. Always complaining about noise, asking nosy questions, trying to borrow stuff he never returns. Opened the door. What's up, Larry? Your phone's been going crazy. Heard it buzzing through the wall all morning. Everything all right? Family stuff. All good. Sounded urgent. You sure you don't need... I'm sure. Thanks, though. Closed the door before he could dig deeper. Larry meant well, but I wasn't in the mood for his nosiness. Around 2 in the afternoon, unknown number. Answered on a hunch. Finally! Damon! Why aren't you answering me? Do you have any idea what you've done? Chelsea's voice came. Loud. Pretty sure I spelled it out clearly. You can't just cancel everything. Connor and Sophie are crying. They were so excited to spend time with you. How can you be this cruel to children? Chelsea, I'm not mad at the kids. I'm disappointed you gave me an ultimatum. You told me not to come unless I babysat. I'm respecting your decision. I didn't mean it like that. You're being completely insane. Your words were pretty clear. Don't be sensitive. I was stressed, okay? I didn't mean it that way. And I was stressed about spending 22 grand on a trip where I was told to babysit instead of relax. But hey, at least I didn't issue ultimatums. Uncomfortable silence. You never said you were paying for all that. I laughed. Who did you think was covering it? The Christmas fairy? I thought everyone was helping. Everyone was helping. I helped to the tune of $22,500. What was your contribution? Besides demands and ultimatums? More silence. Chelsea, I paid for everything because I wanted us to have a good New Year's. But the second I set one boundary about not babysitting for 8 hours, you kicked me out. So I took my money with me. Seems fair. But the kids will survive. Take them to Eric's parents like usual. Do something affordable. Normal people don't spend New Year's at premium Tahoe resorts anyway. You're being vindictive. I'm being consistent. You made the trip conditional. So did my wallet. Hung up before she could respond. Messages kept flooding in all day. Extended family members I hadn't heard from in years suddenly cared about family unity. Suddenly, everyone had an opinion. My friend Chris called that evening. We'd been planning our own trip to Cabo for New Year's. Had it booked for months before this family drama erupted and plans changed. Dude, your sister's losing it on social media. Let me guess. She's the victim. Oh, full martyr mode. Her mom friends are eating it up with a spoon. I pulled up Facebook. Sure enough, Chelsea had written this whole sob story about family members who manipulate with money and how she's teaching her kids that love isn't transactional. The whole thing was ridiculous. Screenshot everything. Not to blast her back, but because I had a feeling this was going to get worse before it got better. Uncle Phil was the only family member with a functioning brain. Called me directly. Your mom's been working the phones like a campaign manager. Wanted you to know what she's saying. I can guess. She's telling everyone you're being stubborn. That Chelsea's family is suffering because of your ego. He paused. She's leaving out the 22 grand part, though. Of course she is. Can't make me look reasonable. For what it's worth, Damon, I think you're handling this exactly right. Your parents are refusing to accept the truth that they'd spoiled Chelsea for too long. The pressure campaign continued for weeks. Everyone had an opinion about my character, and none of them were flattering. According to my extended family, I was selfish, cruel, vindictive, petty, immature, and probably the worst person alive. The only thing I wasn't, apparently, was right. So 3 days before New Year's, Chris and I flew to Cabo. Since the family's trip was canceled, thought I'd enjoy New Year's with my best friend instead. About dang time you grew a spine, he said when we landed. Been waiting years for this moment. Feels weird, like waiting for the other shoe to drop. There's always another shoe with families like yours. Enjoy the peace while it lasts. Cabo was perfect. Warm weather, great food, zero family drama. My phone stayed mostly off. I'd sent brief messages to my parents saying I loved them and hoped they had a good New Year's. That was it. No engagement, no guilt trips, no responding to Chelsea's increasingly unhinged texts. Before I left, I'd given Larry a key to grab my mail. The only neighbor I remotely trusted. He seemed harmless, eager to help. Yeah, that was a big mistake. New Year's Eve in Cabo was everything I needed. Chris and I counted down with a group of people we'd met at the resort. We toasted at midnight. To boundaries, Chris said. And consequences, I added. Woke up New Year's Day tired but satisfied. Turned my phone on for the first time in 36 hours. 47 missed calls. Messages from everyone. Mom, Dad, Aunt Sharon, Cousin Michelle, even Eric had called. The timing was weird. All the calls happened in the same 2-hour window early that morning. I got a bad feeling. Called Chris. Something's wrong. Everyone's been blowing up my phone. Maybe they're just guilt-tripping you about New Year's? Checked voicemails. Mom's voice came through first, high-pitched and panicked. Damon, something terrible has happened. Call immediately. Dad messaged. Son, we have a situation. Call as soon as possible. Dialed Mom back. She answered on the first ring. Oh, thank God. Damon, there's been an incident. What happened? Your apartment. There was a break-in. Your neighbor Larry called the police. They need you to contact them. My stomach dropped. What happened? I don't know the details. Larry said it looks bad. Really bad. You need to call the police. Got the number and called immediately. The officer who answered confirmed my address. Told me there'd been significant property damage. They'd responded to a neighbor's call about loud crashes and breaking glass. By the time they arrived, whoever did it was gone. How bad? Sir, you'll need to assess it yourself. But it's substantial. We've secured the scene and documented everything. When can you return? I can be there by tomorrow evening. We'll need a statement. Bring ID and any documentation about your residence. Hung up. Stared at Chris. Someone trashed my place. Trash like college party damage or trashed like the cops are involved and called it substantial. His expression shifted. You don't think... Yeah, I think exactly that. We flew back the next day. Chris came with me, which I appreciated. Landed around 6 and drove straight to my apartment. Police tape remnants still clung to the doorframe. Larry was waiting in the hallway looking guilty. Damon, man, I'm so sorry. I heard everything around 11. Called the cops immediately. Did you see who it was? He looked away. I gave a statement to the police. They said they'd discuss it with you. Interesting. I unlocked my door and immediately understood. My apartment looked like a freaking crime scene. The TV was face down on the floor. Screen shattered into 1,000 pieces. The couch had been slashed open. Kitchen cabinets hung open with every dish smashed on the floor. Broken glass everywhere. The bathroom mirror was cracked. My bedroom looked like someone had a violent rage episode with my clothes. Everything torn, thrown, stomped on. Mattress slashed. Dresser drawers pulled out and broken. But the living room was the masterpiece. Someone had spray painted "selfish piece of trash" across my wall in huge, dripping red letters. The same words Chelsea had called me in her text messages. Family photos torn and scattered like confetti. My laptop smashed open on the floor. Chris whistled low. Geez, man. Yeah. Then I remembered something that made my pulse jump. The security cameras. I'd installed 2 hidden cameras 6 months ago after cars got broken into in the parking lot. One inside pointing at the front door, one covering the living room. Both uploaded footage to the cloud automatically. Pulled out my phone. Logged into the security app with shaking hands. Please be there. The footage was all there. Every second. Backed up to the cloud. Started the playback from around when Larry said he called the cops. Held my breath. 10:40 p.m. The front door opens. Someone comes in using a key. The camera catches everything perfectly. Chelsea walks in first, looking around like she's on a mission. Eric follows right behind her. She's carrying a spray paint can. She goes straight for the living room, picks up my lamp and hurls it at the TV. Screen explodes. Eric grabs a framed photo off the wall and smashes it on the floor. They're both moving fast, like they'd planned this. Then they go on. 20 minutes straight trashing the whole place. 11 p.m. They both leave quickly. Door slams. They destroyed my entire life in 20 minutes. and I had every single second in crystal clear high-definition footage. Chris watched over my shoulder. That's your crazy sister. Yeah. That's felony destruction of property. That's breaking and entering. She's done. Yeah. I replayed it. Watched Chelsea spray paint those words across my wall. This was calculated revenge. Went back into the hallway. Larry was still there, looking like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Larry, did my sister come by asking about me? He couldn't meet my eyes. She came earlier. Said she was worried about you. Said she needed to check on your place to make sure everything was okay. Seemed really concerned. I thought, you gave her the key. She's family. I thought I was helping. She seemed so nice and worried, and she just committed multiple felonies in my apartment. His face went pale. Oh God. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. She was so convincing. I just wanted to help. I wanted to be angry at him. Actually, I was. But honestly, Chelsea had probably played him. Put on the concerned sister act. Larry was just naive. It's handled. The cops have it now. Back inside, I called the detective. Explained I had video footage of the entire incident. He said he'd be there in 20 minutes. Detective Castillo showed up and watched the footage. Taking notes. This is about as clear-cut as cases get. What happens next? We'll issue warrants for their arrest. Given the video evidence, they'll be picked up within 48 hours. You need to file a report detailing all damages. Photograph everything. Keep receipts for replacements. Contact your insurance company immediately. They're looking at felony charges. Chris and I spent the next 3 hours documenting everything. Plus, the cost to repaint and repair everything. The total hit $38,000. Around midnight, after Detective Castillo left, I finally called Mom back. Damon, are you home? How bad is it? It's bad, Mom. Everything's destroyed. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. Do you have any idea who? Yeah, I know exactly who. Got them on camera. Silence. What do you mean you have them on camera? I mean I have security footage of Chelsea and Eric breaking in and destroying my place. The cops have the video. They're issuing arrest warrants. Damon, no. You can't be serious. You can't. Dead serious. They're getting arrested. But Chelsea wouldn't. She couldn't. She did. Mom's voice shifted into panic mode. You can't press charges. She's your sister. Think about the children. This will destroy her life. She'll go to prison. You have to. I know exactly what I have to do. No, it's not. You can tell them you don't want to press charges. Damon, please. We can work this out. Let us pay for the damages. Just don't involve. Too late. Damon, be reasonable. She made a mistake. She was emotional. Dad grabbed the phone. His voice was ice. Son, you need to think very carefully about what you're doing. Pressing charges will tear this family apart. Chelsea tore it apart when she committed multiple felonies. Don't be dramatic. It's just stuff. It can be replaced. Great. Then she can replace it. Through her insurance or through restitution ordered by a judge. You're really going to send your sister to jail? Your own flesh and blood? Yes. Hung up before he could say more. Chris grabbed snacks from my car. We sat on the floor of my destroyed apartment surrounded by the wreckage. Your family's insane. Yeah, I'm really seeing that now. What's next? Now we watch them burn. Chelsea and Eric were arrested 48 hours later, both charged with breaking and entering, criminal mischief, vandalism, and destruction of property. Bail set at $15,000 each, $30,000 total. Mom called within an hour of their booking. Damon, Chelsea's in jail? She's terrified. The bail is $30,000. You know we don't have that kind of money. Then I guess she sits there until her arraignment. You can't mean that. She's sitting in a cell right now crying. This is killing me. How can you be so cold? How can she break into my home and destroy everything I own? You ruined her New Year's. She wasn't thinking straight. Being emotional doesn't excuse committing felonies. She's an adult. Adults face consequences for their actions. But the children need their mother. Connor and Sophie are asking where mommy is. How am I supposed to explain this to them? Tell them mommy made very bad choices and now she's facing the consequences. Damon, I'm begging you. Help with the bail. We'll pay you back. Not happening. Dad grabbed the phone. Listen here, you're going to drop these charges and help with bail. That's final. No, I'm not. Excuse me? You heard me. I'm not dropping anything. I'm not paying anything. Your daughter must face the consequences. You smug, ungrateful. Don't. You've enabled her entitled behavior for years. Guilt tripped me for setting boundaries. And when she committed felonies, your first instinct was to make me fix it. I'm done, Dad. Hung up. Turned my phone off. Needed peace to deal with insurance and repairs, without constant harassment. The insurance adjuster came the next day. took photos, reviewed my documentation. The estimate came back at $38,000 in damages. My deductible was $2,000. Insurance would cover the rest, but processing would take weeks. I stayed with Chris in the meantime. My phone kept buzzing from relatives, cousins, aunts, uncles, everyone begging me to help with bail. Now I was the villain sending his sister to jail over a little property damage. Uncle Phil called. Damon, what Chelsea did was criminal. Serious criminal. Don't let anyone guilt you into backing down. Everyone thinks I'm overreacting. Everyone's an enabler. Chelsea's been spoiled rotten her entire life. Maybe this'll finally teach her the world doesn't revolve around her. That's what I'm hoping. Your dad's losing his mind, by the way. Calling everyone trying to organize pressure on you. Saying you're destroying the family over your ego. Sounds about right. Chelsea stayed in jail for 3 days. Eric's parents finally bailed them both out. Had to sell stocks, apparently. Took a big financial hit. Good. Mom called once Chelsea was released. Put her on speaker. Damon, I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. I wasn't thinking. Please, can we talk about dropping the charges? No. What do you mean, no? I have 4 kids. If I get convicted, I could go to prison. My kids could end up in foster care. This will ruin my entire life. Not my problem. Should have thought about that before destroying my apartment. I wasn't thinking. I was emotional. You have to understand. It doesn't excuse causing $38,000 in damage. You made choices. Now you face consequences. She started sobbing. Real dramatic sobs. How can you be so cold? I'm your sister. We grew up together. How can you just throw me away like this? I'll pay for everything. I swear. Just drop the charges, please. The prosecutor won't drop charges even if I wanted them to. And I don't. This is criminal court now. It's out of my hands. The family pressure went nuclear. Chelsea posted on Facebook about being arrested for a family disagreement, about how her brother was vindictively pressing charges over broken furniture. The comments were exactly what you'd expect. People who didn't know the full story offering thoughts and prayers and outrage at police brutality and the justice system. Mom's friend Amber commented, I can't believe your own brother would do this to you. Some people have no family values. Another one, Nicole. Praying for you, hun. Stay strong. Your brother sounds toxic. I sat there reading these comments, each one more ridiculous than the last. These people had no idea what actually happened. They were eating up her victim narrative like it was gospel. Chris saw it and showed me. She's really leaning into the victim thing. Are you going to respond? I thought about it. Then an idea hit me. A petty, absolutely perfect idea. Actually, yeah, I am. So, I pulled up the security footage on my laptop, downloaded the 20-minute clip, opened my video editing software, and made a highlight reel. Just the best parts. Chelsea hurling the lamp at my TV. Eric slashing my couch. Chelsea spray painting selfish piece of trash across my wall. Set it to timestamps. Exported it. Uploaded it to a private video hosting site. Then I went through Chelsea's Facebook post and made a list. Every single person who'd commented defending her. All the mom friends. All the supportive relatives who didn't know the full story. Every single one. Typed a message. Hi, I saw you commented support for my sister Chelsea regarding her recent legal troubles. She described it as a family disagreement over broken furniture. I thought you should see what that actually looked like. This is security footage from my apartment. Total damage. $38,000. Both Chelsea and Eric are facing felony charges. Hope this clears up any confusion. Attach the video link. Hit send to all 23 people. Chris watched over my shoulder. Oh, this is about to go nuclear. The responses started coming in within an hour. Most people didn't reply directly to me, but I could see the Facebook comments disappearing one by one. Amber's supportive comment? Gone. Nicole's prayer hands? Deleted. By the next morning, Chelsea's Facebook post had gone from 23 supportive comments down to 4. My phone rang. Chelsea. I let it go to voicemail. She called 6 more times. Finally left a message. What did you do? Amber just called me asking if I was okay. Said you sent her some video. My friends are all messaging me. Nicole said she can't believe what she saw. Answer your phone now. Listen to the voicemail on speaker with Chris. We both cracked up. That's the sound of reality hitting, Chris said. Mom called next. Damon, Chelsea is hysterical. She said you sent a video to all her friends. Please tell me you didn't. I sent the security footage to everyone who commented on her Facebook post, calling me toxic and vindictive. Now they know the truth. You're humiliating her. She wanted to tell her side of the story. I showed mine. Hung up. My phone kept buzzing with messages from relatives. Apparently Chelsea was having a complete meltdown. Her carefully crafted victim narrative had exploded in her face. Uncle Phil texted, "I heard about the video. Brilliant move. She needed a dose of reality." Chris grinned. "That was the pettiest thing I've ever seen. I'm genuinely proud of you." The best part? Two of Chelsea's friends actually reached out to apologize to me. Amber sent a long message about how she had no idea the extent of the damage and felt terrible for commenting without knowing the full story. Nicole said she'd been completely wrong and that Chelsea needed serious help. Chelsea deleted the entire Facebook post that evening. Too late, though. Screenshots live forever. Chris and I ordered takeout to celebrate. You know she's going to be even more pissed now. What's she going to do? She's on bail. One wrong move and she goes right back to jail. Fair point. The preliminary hearing was 3 weeks out. In that time, I focused on repairs. Insurance money came through. Started replacing furniture, repainting walls. The apartment slowly came back together. Larry apologized constantly, felt terrible about giving Chelsea the key. I told him it wasn't his fault. Chelsea was a skilled manipulator. Work was suffering, though. My boss noticed I was distracted. I had to explain the situation. She was sympathetic, but made it clear I needed to get my focus back soon. Performance still mattered. The preliminary hearing arrived. Chris came with me for support. Chelsea and Eric showed up with their public defender looking absolutely miserable. Mom and Dad sat on their side of the courtroom shooting daggers at me with their eyes. Uncle Phil sat with me. The prosecutor presented the video evidence on a large screen. The judge watched without expression as Chelsea and Eric destroyed my apartment. When it finished, he looked at them. "Do you dispute that this is you in the video?" Their lawyer answered. "No, Your Honor. However, we'd like to argue that this was a crime of passion, stemming from family conflict and emotional distress. Save it for trial. I'm binding this over. Trial date will be set within 60 days. Banged his gavel. Chelsea looked like she might throw up. Eric stared at the floor. Mom was crying. Dad looked furious. Outside the courthouse, Dad confronted me. "Satisfied? You're dragging your sister through the legal system over some broken furniture. Feel good about yourself? Try $38,000 in calculated destruction. And no, I'm not satisfied yet." Mom grabbed my arm. "Damon, please. Family forgives. We work things out. We don't send each other to prison." Pulled my arm away. She made her bed. She can lie in it now. Uncle Phil walked up. "Let's go, Damon. Nothing productive happening here." We left them standing there. In the parking lot, Uncle Phil clapped me on the shoulder. "Handled that perfectly. Didn't feel perfect? Never does. But your parents needed to hear it." The trial got scheduled for 2 months later. Chelsea's lawyer tried negotiating a plea deal. The prosecutor sent me the terms. Chelsea would plead guilty to criminal mischief, pay full restitution of $38,000, serve 2 years probation, complete anger management courses, and have a permanent criminal record. Eric would get similar terms. It was fair. They'd avoid jail time, but face real consequences. Financial devastation, criminal records, probation, the works. I told the prosecutor I'd accept the plea. Out of practicality, trial would be stressful and time-consuming. The plea deal gave me restitution and punished them appropriately. Mom called when she found out. "Thank you. I know this was hard, but thank you for not pushing for prison time. Don't mistake this for forgiveness. Still, it means something. It means you care. If she violates probation even once, she goes to jail. Make absolutely sure she understands that." The plea hearing was quick. Chelsea and Eric stood before the judge, admitted guilt, and accepted the terms. The judge warned them that any probation violations would result in immediate incarceration. They both nodded, looking defeated and broken. Afterward, Mom approached me in the hallway. Dad was with her. Both looked exhausted, like they'd aged 10 years in 2 months. "Damon, can we talk? Just the 3 of us?" We found a quiet corner away from everyone else. Dad spoke first. His voice was rough, defeated. "Damon, we owe you an apology. We handled this entire situation wrong from the very beginning. Wasn't expecting that. Go on." "Chelsea was wrong to give you that ultimatum about New Year's. We were wrong to back her up instead of telling her she was being unreasonable." He paused. "And when she committed crimes over it, our first instinct was to protect her instead of holding her accountable. We were wrong." Mom nodded, tears streaming down her face. "We've spoiled Chelsea her entire life, made excuses for everything she did, put pressure on you to accommodate her nonsense. It wasn't fair to you. We're the reason she thought she could do what she did." "Yeah, you did." Dad continued. "Chelsea needs real consequences. We're not going to bail her out anymore, financially or otherwise. I'll believe that when I see it. Fair enough. We have to earn your trust back. We know that, but we want to try. We want a better relationship with you that isn't based on us taking you for granted. Mom grabbed my hand. We've been terrible parents to you. That changes now. The apology felt genuine, raw, real, but I was too tired to fully process it. Where do we go from here? One day at a time, Dad said. We rebuild slowly. If you're willing to give us that chance. I'm willing to try. But things are different now. I'm not the family bank. I'm not the emotional support. I'm not the guy who drops everything to fix everyone else's problems. Those days are over. Understood. And Chelsea needs to understand it too. She wants help, she asks respectfully, and accepts no for an answer. Like a normal person. Mom nodded. We'll make absolutely sure she understands. The restitution payments started coming monthly. Chelsea had to set up a payment plan. $3,000 a month for over a year. Eric's parents helped some, but most came from Chelsea and Eric's income. They had to cut expenses dramatically. Chris and I met for dinner a few months into the restitution period. How's the family drama? Surprisingly quiet. Chelsea's keeping her head down, scared of violating probation. Parents are actually respecting boundaries for once. Think it'll last? Honestly? No clue, but for now it's peaceful. I'll take it. 6 months later, Chelsea called. Her voice was different. Smaller. Actually humble for once in her life. Damon, I owe you a real apology. Not the crying, desperate one at the courthouse. A real one. I'm listening. You were absolutely right to press charges. I needed this. The criminal record, the restitution, the probation, the anger management courses. I needed all of it. I was out of control. Glad you finally figured that out. The courses have actually helped. I've been working on myself, learning to handle frustration without lashing out or expecting everyone to cater to me. It's been really hard, but necessary. I needed to change. Good, because if you ever pull anything remotely like that again, I won't. I promise. I've learned my lesson. Time would tell if that was true, but the change seemed genuine. The criminal record alone would follow her forever. Every job application, every background check, every rental application. She'd have to explain what she did for the rest of her life. That was the point. The family dynamics had completely shifted. Mom and Dad stopped treating Chelsea like she could do no wrong. Stopped expecting me to be the reliable workhorse who funded everything. We were finding balance. Awkward, uncomfortable, but healthier balance. New Year's Eve rolled around again. Full circle. This time, no Tahoe, no family drama. Just Chris and me doing our own thing. Mom called that afternoon. Damon, I know you're busy tonight, but I wanted to wish you a happy new year. And to thank you. You too, but for what? You forced us all to face reality. It was painful, but necessary. She would have kept spiraling if you hadn't drawn that line. Just wanted basic respect, Mom. That's literally all I ever wanted. I know, and you deserved it. We're trying to do better. All of us. After we hung up, I sat there thinking about everything that had happened. It had been one heck of a year, but I'd come out the other side with something I'd never had before. Genuine respect for my family, boundaries that were actually honored. A life that was truly mine without constant demands and guilt trips. Was it worth $22,000 in canceled vacations and $38,000 in property damage? Yup, worth every penny. Setting boundaries isn't cruel. It's survival. That family who truly loves you will respect your limits. Chris came over later for our low-key celebration. Good food, good company, zero obligations. Another year down, he said. Here's to not being a doormat. Amen to that. Think Chelsea's actually changed? Time will tell. But at least she knows consequences are real now. And your parents? They're actually trying. That's all I can really ask for. What about you? You good? I thought about it. My apartment was rebuilt and actually nicer than before. Work was solid. Family relationships were healthier than they'd been in my entire life. I wasn't funding anyone's lifestyle. Wasn't rearranging my life for other people's convenience. Yeah, I'm actually good. The ball dropped at midnight. New year. New beginning. Chelsea texted at 12:15 a.m. Happy New Year. I know we're not close like before, but I hope you have a great year. You deserve it after everything. Stared at the message. Typed back simple and honest. You too. It wasn't much, but it was real. Some lessons cost $22,000 in canceled vacations. Some cost $38,000 in property damage and criminal charges. Mine cost both. But the education was worth every penny, because now I knew what I was worth, knew what I deserved, knew that loving family doesn't mean sacrificing yourself on the altar of their entitlement. And if anyone ever tried that ultimatum nonsense again, they'd learn the same lesson Chelsea did the hard way. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel, and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks. This story is titled, My Wife Swapped Our IVF Embryo for Her Ex's, so I swapped her out of my entire life. So I'm sitting here at 3 a.m. typing this on my phone because I can't sleep, and I figure some of you might learn something from the absolute train wreck my life turned into. Fair warning, this is going to be a long one. I'm Jack, 32 male, and up until a few months ago, I thought I had a pretty decent life with my wife Emma, 31 female. We had the house in an okay neighborhood, both making good money, and to everyone on the outside, we were that couple that seemed to have their shit together. You know the type. We even had this giant Maine Coon cat named Thor, who was basically our first kid, huge orange fluffball, that would sleep on my chest every night and attack my feet every morning at exactly 5:30 a.m., like clockwork. Emma always said Thor was more my cat than hers. She wasn't wrong. He'd follow me around the house like a dog and would sit in the bathroom sink while I got ready for work. For 2 years, we'd been trying to have a kid. 2 freaking years. At first, it was exciting, like, hey babe, tonight might be the night. But after months of negative tests, it just became this dark cloud hanging over us. Every month was the same. Hope, disappointment, silence, repeat. We'd just sit there not talking because what was there to say? Better luck next time? Yeah, right. I remember this one night, after another negative test, Emma just sat on the bathroom floor crying. I didn't know what to say anymore. All our friends were having kids left and right, posting their perfect family pics on Instagram, and we were stuck in this loop of disappointment. After a bunch of tests, the doctors couldn't find anything specifically wrong with either of us. Just one of those unexplained infertility cases that drive you nuts because there's nothing to actually fix. Emma suggested IVF one night. Her voice was all shaky when she said, "It's our best chance." I didn't even hesitate. Said yes right away because I thought we were in this together, you know? I mean, that's what marriage is supposed to be, right? A team? The financial hit was tough. Insurance only covered part of it, so we dipped into our savings. But I figured it would be worth it in the end. We'd finally have our family. She took over everything with the IVF process. Said I was already stressed with work and she'd handle all the appointments. Just routine stuff, she'd say. The clinic will call if they need anything important, and I trusted her completely. I did go to a few key appointments. When we went in for the actual embryo transfer, I was right there holding her hand while the doctor explained everything. I remember thinking this was our special moment, the beginning of our family. I even took a picture of us in the clinic room to remember the day our kid's life began. The first few months after the procedure worked, everything seemed perfect. Emma was finally pregnant. The morning sickness wasn't too bad, and we started turning the spare room into a nursery. I painted the whole thing myself over a weekend. Thor kept trying to help by walking through the paint tray and then across the carpet, so that was fun to clean up. We were even on the same page about not wanting to know the gender. Wanted it to be a surprise. Emma had names picked out for either option. We were making plans, building a future. At least that's what I thought we were doing. Her pregnancy was going smoothly. She hit the 5-month mark and was finally showing for real, not just the is she pregnant or did she have a big lunch kind of showing. I was getting more excited about becoming a dad with each passing week. Already had a list of dad jokes ready to go and everything. I started putting together the crib one night and man, those instructions might as well have been written in ancient Egyptian. Took me like 3 hours and a YouTube tutorial to figure it out. Thor kept jumping in the box and attacking the little Allen wrench. Not helpful, buddy. At this point, I was doing all these little things to prepare. Reading those what to expect books that Emma bought, downloading apps that tell you how big the baby is each week. Your baby is now the size of an avocado. All that stuff that first-time dads do. Then one random Tuesday night, I was going through some boring insurance paperwork, just making sure everything was covered for the delivery. Emma was already asleep, and I was at the kitchen table with Thor purring in my lap, sorting through all the medical forms and bills we'd collected. That's when I noticed something weird. A sperm donor ID that wasn't mine. Not my name, not my patient number from the clinic. Some completely different code. At first, I thought I was just tired and reading it wrong, but I checked it again, compared it to my own patient number from another form. No match. That was the moment everything in my chest went cold. I told myself it had to be some mistake. The clinic probably just messed up the paperwork. There's no way this was real, right? I mean, Emma wouldn't... She couldn't... I didn't sleep that night. Just lay there staring at the ceiling, wondering if I even knew who she was anymore. The next morning, I waited until she left for work, then drove straight to the IVF center. I remember sitting in the parking lot for like 20 minutes, just trying to work up the courage to go in. because deep down, I think I already knew. When I finally walked in, the receptionist gave me this weird look, but I kept it cool. Super polite, just asking for information. Hi, I was reviewing some paperwork for my wife's treatment, and I noticed something strange. Can you confirm which embryo was used for our procedure? The receptionist, Melissa according to her name tag, smiled and started typing away at her computer. Then I saw her face change. That little frown, the slight head tilt. My stomach dropped before she even said a word. That's odd, she said, squinting at her screen. It looks like the embryo used wasn't the one initially assigned to your case. I felt my heart pounding in my ears. What do you mean? It looks like a donor specimen was used instead. She looked up at me with this confused expression. But that should have required your signed consent. I just stared at her, trying to keep my voice steady. I never signed anything. She checked the file again. It says here that your wife authorized the change. Everything inside me went cold. So you just switched embryos without checking with me? Her face went white. That's not supposed to happen. We have policies to prevent that. Then explain how it did, I said, trying not to lose it in the middle of the waiting room. She started mumbling about getting a supervisor, but I was already heading for the door. I needed to confront Emma. Now I called my boss on the drive home, told him I had a family emergency. I must have sounded as messed up as I felt because he didn't even ask questions. Just told me to take whatever time I needed. I drove way too fast, my mind racing with a million thoughts. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I was shaking from rage. I remember thinking as I put my key in the door that this moment was going to be the line in my life. Everything before now and everything after. And I was right. I walked into the house and slammed the door behind me. Thor bolts from his window perch like I just set off a firecracker. Poor dude hated loud noises. I expected Emma to be at work, but there she was, sitting on our couch crying. Her face was all red and puffy, hands shaking as she wiped her eyes. I barely made it inside when she said, "You went to the IVF center?" It wasn't even a question. That's when I knew for sure this wasn't some mix-up. She knew exactly what I'd found out. I just stood there staring at her, not saying a word. Honestly, I was afraid if I started talking, I'd start yelling, and I've never been the yelling type. My friend Olivia works there, she whispered. She texted me that you were asking questions. She told me you were upset. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. Is that the same friend who helped you switch the embryos? She sucked in a breath, her whole body flinching. That was all I needed to see. She knew exactly what she'd done. Why? My voice came out ice cold. I didn't recognize it as my own. She rubbed her face, looking anywhere but at me. At one point, she tried to reach for my hand, and I stepped back like she was trying to hand me a snake. You wouldn't understand, she finally said, still not meeting my eyes. I wanted the best for our child. I wanted strong genes, healthy genes. Meaning? She hesitated, then finally said, I used an anonymous donor from the clinic's database. Someone with better genetic traits. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Better than mine? I laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because this wasn't just a betrayal. This was straight up insanity. The donor has no family history of heart disease or cancer, she rushed to explain. He's tall, athletic, has a doctorate in biochemistry. I wanted to give our baby the best start. You know what's messed up? My dad had a minor heart condition. Nothing serious, just needed medication. Emma knew that. She was basically saying my family's genes weren't good enough for her. So you decided that without telling me? You just erased me from our child's life? And you thought that was your decision to make? She stood up, arms wrapped around her belly protectively. It's still our baby, Jack. You'll still be the father in every way that matters. Except actually being the father, I shot back. Except for the part where you lied to me for months. Except for the part where you went behind my back and made this massive decision without me. Thor had crept back into the room and was sitting in the corner, eyes wide, watching us. Even the cat knew this was bad. I was trying to do what's best for our family, she said, her voice cracking. I thought you'd understand if I just what? Found out after the baby was born? When were you planning to tell me, Emma? Or were you just hoping I'd never find out? That I'd raise some stranger's kid thinking it was mine? She didn't answer that, which was an answer itself. I ran my hands through my hair, trying to think. And this friend of yours at the clinic, Olivia? She just helped you commit fraud? Because that's what this is. You forged my consent. You lied on medical documents. Emma's eyes went wide. It wasn't like that. Olivia just helped with the paperwork. She didn't forge anything. Right, she just conveniently forgot to get my signature before swapping out my sperm for some random donor. There was a long silence. Emma kept opening her mouth like she wanted to say something, then closing it again. Finally, she sat back down, shoulders slumped. I thought I was doing the right thing. I really did. I grabbed my keys from the counter. I need to get out of here. I need to think. Where are you going? Her voice was small. Anywhere but here. As I headed for the door, she called after me. Jack, please, we can work through this. We're having a baby. I turned back to her. No, Emma. You're having a baby. I'm apparently just the guy who's supposed to pay for it. I grabbed Thor's carrier from the closet, scooped him up despite his protests, and threw some of his food in a bag. No way was I leaving him behind. You're taking the cat? She asked, incredulous. Yeah, I'm taking the cat. At least he's actually mine. I walked out, not knowing where I was going, just knowing I couldn't stay there another minute without saying things I couldn't take back. It wasn't until I was halfway down the block that the weight of it all really hit me. Everything I thought I had, everything I built, it was all a lie. Thor meowed from his carrier in the passenger seat, his little paws pressing against the mesh like he was trying to figure out what was going on. Yeah, buddy. Same. It's just you and me now, buddy, I told him, feeling like an idiot for talking to my cat. But honestly, at that moment, he was the only family I had left. I drove around for hours with no real destination. Just me and Thor cruising the streets while I tried to wrap my head around how my life had imploded in a single day. Eventually, I ended up at my buddy Mark's place. Didn't even call first. Just showed up at his door with a cat carrier, and probably looking like I'd seen a ghost. Dude, what the hell? Was Mark's greeting when he opened the door. Then he took one look at my face and added, Shit, get in here. I gave him the short version while he grabbed us both beers from his fridge. His reaction was pretty much what you'd expect. Lots of what the actual fuck and she did what. Mark's girlfriend Jen came home while I was mid-story and immediately went into crisis mode, setting up the spare room for me and getting a makeshift litter box for Thor. I think I was still in shock because I just let them handle everything while I sat on their couch staring at nothing. That night, I couldn't sleep. Just laid there in their guest bed with Thor purring on my chest. I turned my phone off when Emma called for the 8th time. I just couldn't deal with more lies. The next morning, I called my lawyer. I'll call her Vanessa. She's this badass woman who helped my brother through his divorce a few years back. When she asked what was going on, I laid it all out. If I leave her now, what happens with the baby? I asked. She looked over my case and frowned. You're legally presumed the father since you're married, unless you challenge paternity in court. If you don't contest it fast, you could still be on the hook for child support, even though it's not biologically yours. I almost threw up right there in her office. Emma had nearly trapped me permanently. What if I prove she committed fraud? Vanessa tapped her pen on the desk. That changes everything. If we can show she deliberately misled you, you won't be financially responsible. But we need solid proof. The fertility clinic's documentation helps, but ideally, we need her to admit it on record or in writing. And our assets? Move them now. If she files first, she can argue for half of everything. I had a lot to process, but something was still bugging me about Emma's story. The anonymous donor with perfect genes thing seemed convenient. Too convenient. Can we subpoena the actual donor records from the clinic? I asked. Vanessa nodded. We can try. They'll fight it on privacy grounds, but given the circumstances, we might have a shot. What are you thinking? I'm thinking my wife is still lying to me. Over the next few days, I started getting my shit together. First thing I did was pull most of our money out of our joint accounts, leaving just enough that she wouldn't immediately notice it was gone. Probably not the most ethical move, but at that point I wasn't feeling particularly ethical. I moved all my important documents to Mark's place. Birth certificate, passport, the deed to my car. I even called the credit card companies to freeze any new charges on our shared cards. Emma kept calling and texting. Stuff like, please come home and we need to talk about this, and I still love you. I ignored most of it, just sent one text saying I needed space. Meanwhile, Vanessa was working on getting access to the donor records. The clinic was fighting it, claiming patient confidentiality, but the judge was sympathetic to my situation. Apparently, fraud will do that. On day 5 of staying at Mark's, I finally agreed to meet Emma at a coffee shop. Neutral territory, public place where I wouldn't lose my cool. I got there early and picked a table in the corner. When she walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked terrible. She sat down across from me, hands immediately reaching for mine across the table. I pulled back. Jack, please, she started. I know I messed up. I know you're angry, but we can fix this. Fix what exactly? I asked. The fact that you lied to me for months? The fact that you decided my genetics weren't good enough for our child? She flinched. That's not what it was about. I just wanted the best for our baby. Yeah, you said that. But this anonymous donor story, is that even true? Her eyes darted away for a split second. Bingo. Of course it's true, she said, but her voice had that slight quiver that I knew meant she was lying. I leaned forward. Who is it really, Emma? Because I'm going to find out one way or another. That meeting at the coffee shop didn't go anywhere. Emma stuck to her anonymous donor story, despite me catching her in the lie. We ended up leaving with nothing resolved except me feeling even more certain she was hiding something big. I went back to Mark's place, where Thor was living his best life, getting spoiled by Jen who kept sneaking him treats when she thought I wasn't looking. At least someone was happy in this whole mess. For the next week, I was basically living two lives. During the day, I'd go to work, pretend everything was fine when coworkers asked about Emma and the baby. Then I'd head to meetings with Vanessa, or spend hours documenting everything I could about our finances and the IVF situation. I even drove back to the house one day when I knew Emma would be at her prenatal appointment. Felt weird using my own key to sneak into my own home, but I needed to grab more clothes and check if there was anything else I should take. That's when I found Emma's laptop. She always kept it password protected, but I knew her passwords. She used the same 3 for everything and had me write them down once when she forgot them. Classic Emma move, being secretive but also disorganized. I hesitated for about 2 seconds before logging in. Normally, I'd never go through someone's private stuff, but normal went out the window when she decided to lie about our kid's paternity. At first, I didn't find much. Just work emails, Amazon orders, pregnancy forums. Then I checked her email trash folder. I found deleted messages between Emma and her friend Olivia from the clinic, dating back almost a year. They were planning the whole thing. Olivia telling Emma when she'd be working so she could handle the paperwork. Emma asking if it was really possible to use a different donor without me finding out. But the real deal was an email thread with someone named Ryan. The subject line was, are you sure about this? I felt my stomach drop as I opened it and started reading. Ryan Matthews, her college boyfriend, the one she dated for 4 years before me, the one she used to mention now and then when talking about her past, the one whose Facebook profile she'd occasionally check just to see what he's up to. The emails were friendly at first, catching up, how's life been, that kind of thing. Then Emma mentioned our fertility struggles and how she'd been thinking about him a lot lately, how they'd always talked about having kids together back in college. Then I saw the text that made my stomach twist, told him she was using his sperm from when he donated to the clinic years ago. Apparently, he'd been a regular donor during med school for extra cash. His response? Surprise, but not anger. He asked if I knew and was okay with it. Emma straight up told him, Jack doesn't need to know. What he doesn't know won't hurt him. I took pictures of everything with my phone. My hands were shaking so bad, some of the shots came out blurry. I forwarded key emails to my own account, then deleted the forwarded messages from her sent folder and emptied her trash again. The whole time, I felt like I was going to throw up. It wasn't just some perfect genes donor, it was her ex-boyfriend. She wanted to have his baby, not mine. I must have sat there for 20 minutes just staring at the wall after I closed the laptop. Everything made sense now. The secrecy, the lies, why she was so insistent on handling all the IVF appointments herself. When I got back to Mark's place, I sent everything to Vanessa. She called me almost immediately. This changes everything, she said. This proves premeditation and deliberate deception. The judge is going to have a field day with this. What's our next move? I asked, feeling weirdly calm despite the chaos. We keep gathering evidence, and we find this Ryan guy. It wasn't hard to find him. Ryan Matthews, physical therapist, working at a clinic about 30 minutes from our house. I looked him up online and recognized him immediately from pictures Emma had shown me years ago. Tall, athletic build, the kind of guy who probably played sports in college. The kind of guy who donates sperm because clinics pay extra for tall, athletic donors. I made an appointment under a fake name. Probably not the most ethical thing, but ethics weren't my priority anymore. The look on his face when I walked into his treatment room, instead of the Mark Johnson he was expecting. Priceless. Pure shock, then recognition, then something that looked a lot like guilt. Jack, he said, frozen in place. What are you doing here? I closed the door behind me. I think you know exactly why I'm here. To his credit, he didn't try to deny anything, just sat down heavily on his stool and ran his hand through his hair. She told me you agreed to it, he said finally. Said you two had talked about using a donor and that you were fine with it being me. And you believe that? That I'd be okay with my wife having her ex-boyfriend's baby? He winced. Looking back, no, it doesn't make sense, but Emma can be convincing. Tell me about it, I muttered. For what it's worth, I didn't know she was lying to you. I wouldn't have agreed if I'd known. I wasn't sure if I believed him, but it didn't really matter. The damage was done. So what happens now? He asked. Are you going to punch me or something? I almost laughed. Number, I just wanted to see if you'd lie to my face like she did. I turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing. Did you two reconnect before or after we started trying for a baby? He looked confused. Before, I guess? She reached out maybe 3 years ago, said she was in town and wanted to grab coffee. We've been in touch on and off since then. 3 years. The whole time we were planning our family, she was laying the groundwork for this. I nodded and walked out, feeling like the last piece of the puzzle had finally fallen into place. I drove around for hours trying to process everything. The betrayal was so much deeper than I'd initially thought. This wasn't just Emma making a messed up decision about genetics. This was Emma planning for years to have her ex's baby while married to me. I finally headed back to Mark's place around midnight. He and Jen were already asleep, but Thor was waiting by the door like he knew I needed some company. I scooped him up and just sat on the guest bed, petting him while I tried to figure out what to do next. The next morning, I called Vanessa and told her about my conversation with Ryan. This is gold, she said. But we need more. Can you get Emma to admit any of this in writing? Text messages, emails, anything? So I did something I'm not proud of. I texted Emma saying I wanted to talk things through, that maybe I was overreacting about the anonymous donor thing. I told her I was willing to listen if she'd just be honest with me. She responded immediately, obviously relieved that I was coming around. We agreed to meet at our house that evening. Before going over, I had one more conversation with Vanessa. We went over the plan for protecting my assets and my future. She had already prepared the divorce papers. Just needed my final go-ahead. When I got to the house, Emma had clearly gone all out trying to make it nice. The place was spotless. She'd made my favorite dinner, even put flowers on the table. Like this was some minor disagreement we were patching up. Jack, she said, rushing to hug me when I walked in. I let her, but didn't hug back. I've missed you so much. We need to talk, I said, not sitting down even though she gestured toward the dining table she'd set. Of course, she said quickly. I want to explain everything. Good, because I have questions, I said, pulling out my phone and hitting record. I started recording. So, tell me again about this donor. The anonymous one with the perfect genes. She launched into the same story she'd told before, about wanting the best genetic profile, about making the choice out of love for our future child. I let her finish, then said, and there's no other reason you chose this particular donor? She hesitated, just for a second. What do you mean? I mean, is there anything else about him that made you choose him specifically? Another pause. No, just the health profile. I nodded slowly. So it has nothing to do with the fact that it's Ryan Matthews? The color drained from her face. What? I saw the emails, Emma. I talked to Ryan. I know everything. She started crying then. Those big dramatic tears that used to make me want to fix whatever was wrong. Now they just made me angry. It's not what you think, she sobbed. Really? Because I think you deliberately chose your ex-boyfriend's sperm, had your friend Olivia bypass clinic protocols, lied to me for months, and planned to let me raise another man's child without ever telling me the truth? Is that not what happened? She kept crying and saying how sorry she was, how she never meant to hurt me, how we could still be a family. I turned off the recording. I had what I needed. I'm filing for divorce, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I've already moved most of my stuff out. You can keep the furniture, but the house is in my name and I'll be selling it. You can't do that, she said, suddenly looking panicked. I'm pregnant. Where am I supposed to go? That sounds like a problem for you and Ryan to figure out. He doesn't want anything to do with the baby, she practically screamed. He just donated sperm. He's not ready to be a father. I almost laughed. Well, neither am I. At least not to this kid. Thor chose that moment to meow loudly from his carrier by the door. I'd brought him to get the rest of his things. She yelled while crying, Jack, please. I know I messed up badly, but I love you. We can work through this. I turned to look at her. Really look at her. Maybe for the last time as her husband. No, Emma, you don't love me. You love what I provide. Stability, a home, a father for your baby. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. I picked up Thor's carrier and headed for the door. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce proceedings, I said, not looking back. Don't call me anymore. As I walked to my car, I felt a weird mix of emotions. Anger, obviously. Hurt, definitely. But also relief. Like I'd finally cut loose an anchor that had been dragging me down. Thor meowed again from his carrier. I know, buddy, I told him. Let's go home. Our real home. That night, I sent the recording to Vanessa. She texted back almost immediately. Perfect. She admitted enough. We move forward tomorrow. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal meetings, paperwork, and planning. Vanessa filed the divorce papers and a motion to legally establish that I wasn't the father of Emma's baby. Meanwhile, Emma was blowing up my phone with messages ranging from desperate apologies to angry accusations. "You're abandoning me when I need you most, and I can't believe you're being so cruel." And my personal favorite, "It's still your baby in every way that matters." I blocked her number after that one. Mark and Jen let me stay with them while I looked for a new place. I found a decent apartment that allowed cats and wasn't too far from work. The hardest part was dealing with friends and family who didn't know the whole story. Emma had apparently been telling people I'd had some kind of mental breakdown and abandoned her during her pregnancy. Some people actually believed her, which showed me who my real friends were. My parents were solidly on my side once I explained what happened. My mom cried when I told her she wouldn't be getting the grandchild we'd all been expecting. My dad just put his hand on my shoulder and said, "You're doing the right thing, son." When the court date finally came, Vanessa presented the emails, the texts, the recorded conversation, the testimony from the clinic about protocol violations. She even had Ryan's statement confirming Emma had misled him about my knowledge and consent. Every time Emma's lawyer tried to paint me as the villain for abandoning my pregnant wife, the judge would just look at the evidence folder and raise an eyebrow. And every time Emma's lawyer tried to interrupt, but the judge held up her hand. I've seen a lot in this courtroom, but the level of deception here is extraordinary. The final judgment came down exactly as Vanessa had predicted. The divorce was granted. I wasn't legally responsible for the child, and Emma got nothing from our shared assets since the fraud was so clearly documented. Given the evidence of fraud, Mr. Wilson's assets remain his sole property. Mrs. Wilson will not receive any financial compensation from this divorce, the judge said. Additionally, given that Mr. Wilson is not the biological father, the court recognizes his right to revoke any paternal claims to the child. He will not be financially obligated for child support. Emma's lawyer made one last attempt, asking for consideration due to her vulnerable state as an expectant mother. The judge shut that down immediately. Mrs. Wilson willingly deceived her husband, knowingly altered medical procedures without his consent, and falsified financial statements. There will be no additional compensation awarded. One tap of the gavel. Case closed. Emma just sat there, frozen. Her lawyer closed his briefcase without a word. I stood, buttoned my suit jacket, and walked out without looking back. Outside the courthouse, I took the deepest breath I'd had in months. It was finally over. That was 6 months ago now. I'm still in my apartment, though I'm thinking about buying a small house with a yard where Thor can watch birds. He's doing great, by the way, currently sleeping on the keyboard as I try to type this. I deleted all my social media for a while, just to avoid the drama. When I came back online, I found out Emma had moved back to her hometown to live with her parents. The baby was born last month. A boy, according to mutual friends who still talk to her. I try not to think about it. Looking back, I'm still amazed at how quickly someone I thought I knew completely could turn into a stranger. The Emma I married, and the Emma who did this to me. They can't be the same person, right? But they are, and I just didn't see it until it was almost too late. If there's any lesson here, I guess it's that you never really know someone. Even after years together, people can surprise you in the worst ways. But also, you're stronger than you think. 6 months ago, I thought my life was over. Now, I'm doing okay. Not great, not terrible, just okay. And sometimes, okay is enough. Final update. Hey Reddit, it's Jack again. Wasn't planning on updating, but some crazy shit went down last weekend that I need to share. I'm chilling at home watching the game with Thor when someone starts pounding on my door. I open it to find Emma standing there with her parents and her brother Mike, and she's holding the baby. They push their way into my house before I can stop them. Emma's mom immediately starts with, "It's time you took responsibility for your son." I'm like, "My son? We both know that's not my kid. There was a whole court case about this, remember? DNA evidence? Ryan Matthews? Your ex-boyfriend whose sperm you used?" Mike gets in my face and says, "Ryan skipped town 3 months ago. Completely ghosted Emma. Quit his job. Deleted social media. He's not paying any child support." "That sucks for her," I say, "but it has nothing to do with me." Emma starts crying, bouncing the fussy baby. "I made a mistake, Jack. A horrible mistake." Her dad jumps in with some BS about how in the eyes of God, the kid is still my responsibility because we were married when he was conceived. Emma actually has the nerve to say, "Look at him, Jack. He could be yours. We don't really know for sure. We do know for sure. There was a paternity test. It was in your court documents." Her mom, "Those tests can be wrong. Look at his eyes. They're just like yours." The audacity of these people trying to gaslight me is unreal. I told them to leave, and Mike shoved me, saying, "You're just going to abandon your wife and child? She's not my wife, and that's not my child. And if you touch me again, I'm calling the cops." Emma, full on sobbing, "Please, Jack. I can't do this alone. My parents are helping, but I had to quit my job. We're barely making ends meet." For a split second, I almost feel bad. Almost. Then, I remember the months of lying and deception. Mike tries to step toward me again, but his dad holds him back. "You'll regret this," Mike says. "We know where you work. We know your parents' address." That's when I pull out my phone and start recording. "Are you threatening me? Should I call the police now, or would you like to leave peacefully?" They finally left, with Emma's dad turning back to say, "This isn't what a real man would do." I just shake my head. A real man doesn't let himself be manipulated. The next day, Emma's family contacted Vanessa, trying to reopen the case. She shut it down immediately, reminding them about the conclusive paternity test. I also installed security cameras around my house and documented the confrontation in case they try something else. Mike's threat about knowing where I work was especially concerning, so I gave my boss a heads up about the situation. Thor's been extra clingy since that day. I've never been more thankful for this cat. Edit. Thanks for the support. Yes, I filed a police report about the threats. No, I don't feel bad for Emma. I feel bad for the kid. But feeling bad doesn't mean I'm responsible. My parents said, "Your sister's wedding is more important than your surgery date. Reschedule it." I rescheduled my whole relationship with them instead, when Mom needed her own emergency money. 6 months later, she learned what reschedule really feels like. Hey Reddit, buckle up because this one's a wild ride about family priorities, medical emergencies, and what happens when you finally stop being the family doormat. I'm still processing everything that went down, but figured this community would appreciate the absolute chaos that unfolded when I finally grew a spine. I'm 28 female, and I've been dealing with a messed up knee for the past 3 years. We're not talking about a little sports injury that'll heal with some ice and rest. I'm talking about a completely torn ACL, meniscus damage, and cartilage deterioration that made every single day a struggle. Walking upstairs felt like someone was driving nails into my kneecap. Standing for more than 20 minutes at my job as a museum curator? Forget about it. The injury happened during a hiking trip gone wrong. Slipped on wet rocks, heard a pop that sounded like a gunshot, and spent the next 6 hours being carried down a mountain by park rangers. The initial ER visit was bad enough, but what came after was worse. 3 years of failed conservative treatments, countless physical appointments, anti-inflammatory medications that wrecked my stomach, and orthopedic specialists telling me I was too young for this kind of damage. My job was understanding at first, but after 3 years of modified duties and me struggling to give tours without visibly limping, they were starting to make noises about whether I could continue in my position. The museum required standing, walking through galleries, climbing stairs to archives, basic stuff that had become my personal nightmare. Finally got insurance approval for reconstructive surgery after fighting with them for 18 months. The surgery date was set for June 15th, not some random date I picked out of a hat. This was carefully scheduled around my work calendar, my surgeon's availability, and most importantly, it was the only opening he had for the next 4 months. After that, he was booked solid through October, and my insurance pre-authorization would expire. The surgery itself was supposed to be a big deal. 4 to 5 hours in the OR, ACL reconstruction using a hamstring graft, meniscus repair, and cartilage restoration. Then, 6 months of intensive rehabilitation. My surgeon, Dr. Patterson, had been clear about the timeline. Miss this window, and I'd be looking at permanent disability by age 30. The cartilage was deteriorating fast enough that waiting another 4 months could mean the difference between a good outcome and needing a knee replacement before I turned 40. I'd been preparing for months. Saved up 3 months of salary for the recovery period since short-term disability only covered 60% of my income. Arranged for my best friend Hannah to stay with me for the first 2 weeks post-op. Set up a whole recovery station in my apartment with a rented knee scooter, shower chair, and everything the pre-op instructions recommended. Even meal prepped and froze a month's worth of food because I wouldn't be able to stand long enough to cook. My parents knew about all of this. They'd known about the surgery date since February, 4 months in advance. I'd told them multiple times, sent them the pre-op information, explained why this specific date mattered. Mom had even written it on her calendar. I saw her do it during our Sunday dinner in February when I first got the approval. Then my sister dropped her wedding bomb. Let me give you some context about my sister Bethany. She's 25 and she's been the golden child since the day she was born. I'm not exaggerating or being dramatic. I have literal photo albums from our childhood where it's 90% Bethany and maybe 10% me tucked into corners of group shots. When I got into college, they forgot to come to my acceptance celebration dinner. They were helping Bethany pick out a prom dress. When I graduated with honors, they showed up 30 minutes late because Bethany needed them to move furniture in her dorm room. When I got my first real job at the museum, the job I'd worked my butt off for with 2 unpaid internships and volunteer work, they took me to a chain restaurant and spent the whole dinner talking about Bethany's boyfriend. The favoritism was so consistent and so obvious that even extended family noticed. My aunt pulled me aside at Christmas last year and apologized for how my parents treated me. That's how bad it was. Random relatives felt the need to acknowledge it. Bethany got engaged last November to this guy Dylan, who works in pharmaceutical sales. Nice enough guy, but their whole relationship moved at lightning speed. They met in August, engaged by November, and suddenly planning a wedding. Mom was over the moon. Started planning immediately, calling me every other day with updates I didn't ask for. The original wedding date was supposed to be October. I remember because Mom mentioned it being perfect fall weather, and how the venue had gorgeous autumn foliage. October would have been fine. My surgery was June, I'd be mostly recovered by October, and everyone would be happy. But apparently October wasn't good enough for Bethany. In late March, I got a group text. Not even a phone call, just a mass text to the family chat that I usually muted because it was 90% Bethany updates and 10% Mom guilt-tripping me about not being more involved in family activities. The text said, "Big announcement! We moved the wedding date to June 15th. The venue had a cancellation and it's our dream date. So excited! June 15th, my surgery date. The date I'd told them about. The date that was written on Mom's calendar. The date that determined whether I'd have functional knees for the rest of my life. I sat in my apartment staring at that text for probably 10 minutes straight. My knee was throbbing because I'd had a particularly rough day at work, and I was looking at this text announcing they'd scheduled a wedding on the one day that I absolutely could not be available. Called Mom immediately. She answered all cheerful and excited. Isn't it wonderful news? The venue is this gorgeous estate with gardens and a gazebo. It was supposed to be $45,000 for an October wedding, but they're giving it to us for $32,000 because it's a cancellation. Bethany's been dreaming about this place since she was a little girl. I pointed out that June 15th was my surgery date. The surgery I'd been waiting 3 years to get. The surgery that determined my entire future mobility. Mom's tone shifted immediately from cheerful to annoyed. Oh, right, your knee thing. My knee thing. 3 years of documented disability, reduced to a thing. Well, you'll have to reschedule it, she continued like it was the most obvious solution in the world. It's just a surgery. They do them all the time. Bethany's wedding only happens once. I explained for the 3rd or 4th time that this wasn't a simple procedure I could just reschedule. The surgeon was booked out for months. My insurance authorization was time-sensitive. My job was already on thin ice about my modified duties. This wasn't optional. Everything's optional if you prioritize correctly, Mom said. That exact phrase. Like she'd read it in some self-help book about time management and decided it applied to major reconstructive surgery. Bethany needs you there. You're her sister. Family comes first. I tried explaining again about the medical necessity, about the permanent damage, about how this wasn't about wanting to attend versus not wanting to attend. This was about literal physical ability to attend. You're being dramatic, Mom cut me off. I'm sure your doctor can find another date. Just call them tomorrow and explain there's a family wedding. They'll understand. She hung up before I could respond. I called Dr. Patterson's office the next morning, not because I actually thought rescheduling was an option, but because I needed documentation that it wasn't possible. The scheduler was sympathetic, but firm. The next available surgical slot was October 8th, and that was only if I could get my insurance to extend the authorization, which typically took 3 to 6 months of appeals. Sent screenshots of the conversation to my parents. Added a detailed explanation of why October wasn't viable. My insurance authorization would expire. The cartilage damage would progress. I could end up needing a full knee replacement instead of a reconstruction. Included medical documentation from Dr. Patterson about the urgency. Dad called that evening. He's usually the reasonable one, or at least I thought he was. Look, I understand you're dealing with pain, but your mother and I are paying $32,000 for this wedding. Bethany chose June 15th specifically because the venue was available and affordable. We can't ask them to change it now. I asked why they couldn't ask Bethany to change it, but they could ask me to risk permanent disability. It's not the same thing, he said. The wedding is already booked. The deposits are paid. Bethany's been planning for months. I'd been planning for months too. I'd been planning for 3 years of dealing with this injury, but apparently wedding planning trumped medical planning. You have to understand, Dad continued. This is important to your mother. She's always dreamed of throwing Bethany a perfect wedding. You're asking her to tell Bethany that her sister's surgery is more important than her wedding day. That's exactly what I was saying. Because it was. Just reschedule the surgery, Dad said, his tone shifting to that authoritative voice he used when he wanted to end a discussion. Be there for your sister. That's what family does. The gaslighting was impressive. They'd turned my medical emergency into me being selfish for not prioritizing a party. Bethany called next. I'd been avoiding her texts, but she caught me while I was at work, and I made the mistake of answering. Are you seriously going to ruin my wedding over a knee surgery? She asked without preamble. Mom told me you're refusing to reschedule. I explained again that rescheduling wasn't possible without serious medical consequences. That's so typical of you, Bethany said. Always making everything about yourself. This is supposed to be my special day, and you're trying to steal attention by claiming you can't reschedule some elective surgery. Elective. The word that makes every medical professional cringe. Yes, technically reconstructive orthopedic surgery is classified as elective because it's scheduled in advance rather than being emergency surgery. But elective doesn't mean optional. It doesn't mean unnecessary. It means scheduled. I can barely walk, I told her flatly. I'm probably going to lose my job if I don't get this fixed. This isn't about attention. Everything's always about you and your problems, Bethany shot back. Do you know how much Mom and Dad are spending on this wedding? How much planning has gone into it? And you want them to throw it all away because you have a sore knee? A sore knee. 3 years of documented medical issues reduced to a sore knee. I'm not asking them to throw anything away, I said, trying to stay calm. I'm asking why they scheduled the wedding on a date they knew I wasn't available. Because the world doesn't revolve around you. Bethany's voice had that edge she gets when she's gearing up for a tantrum. You're not even in the wedding party. You're just a guest. Guests don't get to dictate the date. That stung more than I expected. Not even in the wedding party. Bethany had 4 bridesmaids, 3 of whom she'd met in the last year. But her own sister wasn't worth including. If it's so unimportant whether I'm there or not, I said carefully, then it shouldn't matter that I can't attend. Of course it matters. What are people going to think when my own sister doesn't show up? It'll look terrible. You'll embarrass the whole family. There it was. The real concern wasn't about wanting me there because she valued our relationship. It was about appearances, about what people would think. I have to go, I said. I'm at work. Just reschedule the stupid surgery, Bethany said before I could hang up. Or don't bother coming to any family events ever again. I wish I could say that was an exaggeration or something said in anger. But over the next 2 weeks, that became the official family position. Mom started calling daily, leaving increasingly aggressive voicemails. Other families know how to prioritize. Other daughters would understand family comes first. I don't know how you became so selfish. Dad sent long emails about responsibility and family obligations, how much they'd sacrificed raising 2 daughters, and how this was my chance to show I appreciated everything they'd done for me. Bethany took to social media, posting vague things about blood being thicker than water, and knowing who your real family is when times get tough. Her friends started commenting with support, not knowing the full context, but ready to pile on whoever had wronged her. My aunt, the one who'd apologized for my parents' favoritism at Christmas, called me after seeing Bethany's posts. What's going on? Your mother's telling everyone you're boycotting the wedding out of jealousy. I explained the whole situation. The surgery, the scheduling conflict, the impossibility of rescheduling without medical consequences. That's ridiculous, she said immediately. You need to do what's right for your health. They're being completely unreasonable. It was validating to hear, but it didn't change anything. My parents had made their position clear. Family meant showing up when they wanted me to show up, regardless of personal cost. The final straw came 3 weeks before both the surgery and the wedding. I was having a particularly bad knee day. The weather had shifted and brought rain, which always made the joint stiffen and ache. I'd called out of work because I literally couldn't put weight on my leg without seeing stars. Was sitting at home with ice packs and heating pads, trying to find a position that didn't hurt when my parents showed up unannounced. Mom had a key to my apartment from when I'd had a minor kitchen fire 2 years ago and needed her to let the repair people in. I'd never asked for it back. Big mistake. They walked in while I was on the couch, knee elevated, looking probably as miserable as I felt. We need to talk, Dad said, his voice stern. Mom sat in my armchair, crossing her arms. This has gone on long enough. You're being incredibly selfish, and it needs to stop. I was in too much pain to argue. Just asked what they wanted. We want you to do the right thing, Mom said. We want you to reschedule your surgery and come to your sister's wedding. We want you to stop being stubborn, and think about someone other than yourself for once. I pointed out I was thinking about my future, my health, my ability to work and support myself. You'll figure something out, Dad said dismissively. You always do. You're resourceful. But Bethany only gets married once, and she needs her family there. The irony of calling me resourceful while asking me to sacrifice my mobility wasn't lost on me. I'd always been the one who figured things out because I'd never had the support Bethany got. I already rescheduled everything in my life for this surgery, I said quietly. Work, finances, recovery arrangements. I can't just move it. Of course you can, Mom insisted. You just don't want to. You've always been jealous of Bethany getting attention, and now you're using this surgery as an excuse to make her wedding day about you. Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the pain. Maybe it was 3 years of struggling while they dismissed my injury as a thing and a sore knee. Maybe it was a lifetime of being second place to Bethany. Get out, I said. They looked shocked. I never talked back, never set boundaries, never prioritized myself. Excuse me, Mom said. Get out of my apartment. Give me back my key. Leave. You can't be serious, Dad started. I'm completely serious. You came into my home while I'm in pain to tell me I'm selfish for not wanting to be disabled for the rest of my life. You've made it clear what I'm worth to this family. Now leave. Mom stood up, face red. If you don't come to that wedding, don't bother coming to any family events ever again. We'll be done. No more Sunday dinners, no more holidays, no more help when you need it. You'll be dead to us. Understood, I said. Key. Now. She threw my apartment key on the coffee table and stormed out. Dad followed without another word. After they left, I sat there for probably an hour, just staring at the key on my table. They'd actually said it. The ultimatum. The wedding or the family. I chose my knees. Called Hannah that night and told her everything. She'd been my best friend since college, and she'd witnessed years of my family's treatment. She wasn't surprised, just angry on my behalf. You know this is insane, right? She said. Like, clinically insane behavior. They're threatening to disown you over not attending a party. It's not just a party to them, I said, even though I was defending people who just threatened me. It shouldn't be just a surgery to them either, Hannah pointed out. They're choosing a dress and a cake over their daughter's ability to walk. That's not normal. She was right. I knew she was right. But it still hurt. The surgery went ahead as scheduled on June 15th. Hannah drove me to the hospital at 5 in the morning. Held my hand during pre-op when the anesthesiologist went over the risks. Was there when I woke up groggy and in pain and asking if it went okay. Dr. Patterson said the surgery went well, but the damage was worse than the imaging had shown. He'd had to do more extensive cartilage work. Recovery would be longer and harder than originally anticipated. Maybe 8 months instead of 6. Good thing you didn't wait any longer, he told me during a post-op check while I was still in the hospital. Another few months and we'd have been looking at permanent damage. You made the right call getting this done when you did. The right call. That phrase echoed in my head during the painful first weeks of recovery. My phone was silent. No calls from my parents asking how the surgery went. No texts from Bethany. No one checking if I was okay or needed anything. Hannah moved into my apartment for 2 weeks as planned. She handled medication schedules, helped me to the bathroom, made food, kept me from going stir-crazy during those first awful days when I couldn't do anything but lie there with my leg elevated. Have they called? She asked on day 3. I shook my head. They hadn't. I'd had major surgery, and my family hadn't bothered to check if I'd survived it. Meanwhile, my social media feeds filled with wedding photos. Bethany in a massive white dress. Mom crying happy tears. Dad walking her down the aisle. The venue was indeed gorgeous. All gardens and gazebos and fairy lights. The photos looked like something out of a magazine. Bethany glowing, Dylan looking dapper in his tux, guests dancing and laughing. It looked perfect, like a dream wedding. None of the photos showed me, obviously, because I wasn't there. I was home with a reconstructed knee, learning to navigate my apartment on crutches, trying not to think about the fact that my entire family had written me off. A few relatives reached out. My aunt sent flowers and a card. Thinking of you during recovery, you made the right choice. A couple of cousins texted asking how I was doing and mentioning they'd heard about the family drama. But from my parents? Nothing. From Bethany? Silence. The recovery was brutal. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The first month was constant pain management, physical exercises 3 times a day, struggling to regain any kind of mobility. My job was understanding about the extended timeline, but I could tell they were concerned about when I'd be able to return to full duties. Hannah helped as much as she could, but she had her own job and life. After 2 weeks, she had to go back to her place. though she checked in daily and came over several times a week to help with things I couldn't manage alone. Month 2 was slightly better. Could put partial weight on the leg with crutches. Started outpatient physical sessions. The pain was becoming more manageable, but I was still basically homebound and dependent on others for groceries, errands, and any task requiring 2 functional legs. Month 3, I graduated to a cane and could do more for myself. Started working from home part-time, doing research and writing for the museum's educational programs. Still couldn't stand for long periods or navigate stairs well, but life was becoming more normal. Through all of it, not a single word from my family. I thought about reaching out, thought about calling to explain again why I'd chosen the surgery, why it had been necessary, why I'd had to prioritize my health. But every time I picked up the phone, I remembered Mom's words. "You'll be dead to us." They'd made their choice. I'd made mine. And I was learning to live with the consequences. What I didn't know was that they were about to face consequences of their own. 6 months post-surgery, I was doing pretty well. The knee was functional, still got sore if I overdid it, but I was back at work full-time. Could walk through galleries without limping. Could climb stairs to the archives without wanting to cry. Could have a normal life. My job security was back. My boss even mentioned they were impressed with my determination during recovery and were considering me for a coordinator position opening up in the new year. Life was honestly pretty good. I'd built a routine that didn't include my family. Sunday dinners were replaced with brunch with Hannah and a few other friends. Holidays were spent with people who actually wanted me around. It hurt less than I expected, or maybe it hurt the same amount, but I was getting used to it. Then my phone rang with Mom's number. First contact in 6 months. I stared at the screen for 3 rings before answering. "Hello?" "Hi, honey," Mom said, her voice sugary sweet, the tone she used when she wanted something. "How are you? How's your knee?" 6 months. 6 months of silence. And now she wanted to know about my knee. "It's fine," I said cautiously. "Surgery was successful. I'm back at work." "That's wonderful. I'm so glad to hear it. I knew everything would work out." The casual dismissiveness was staggering. Like my successful recovery was inevitable, and not the result of months of painful rehabilitation that she'd known nothing about because she'd chosen not to know. "What do you need, Mom?" "Can't I just call to check on my daughter?" "You haven't checked on me in 6 months." Silence on her end. Then, "Well, things have been busy with Bethany settling into married life and—" "What do you need?" I repeated. She sighed. "Fine. I need to ask you for a favor." "A favor." The audacity was almost impressive. "Your father and I are in a difficult situation financially," she continued. "There were some unexpected expenses with the wedding that went over budget, and now we're dealing with some medical bills and things are tight. We need to borrow some money to cover things until we can get back on our feet." I let that sink in for a moment. They needed money. 6 months after threatening to disown me, after skipping my surgery, after choosing a party over their daughter's health, they needed money. "How much?" I asked. $15,000, Mom said quickly. "Just temporarily. We'll pay you back as soon as we can. Your father's bonus comes in December, so probably by the new year. $15,000. That was more than half what I'd saved for my surgery and recovery. Money I'd scraped together through years of careful budgeting and overtime. "Medical bills?" I asked. "Who's sick?" "Your father had to have an emergency procedure," Mom said. "Nothing life-threatening, but it wasn't covered entirely by insurance. Between that and the wedding going over budget, we're stretched thin. Dad had a medical procedure, an emergency one, and they were calling me for money." "When was this procedure?" I asked. 3 weeks ago." 3 weeks. They'd known for 3 weeks that they needed money, and they'd waited until now to call. "Why me?" I asked. "Why not ask Bethany and Dylan, or borrow from the bank?" "Bethany and Dylan are dealing with their own expenses, setting up their household. And the bank? Our credit isn't great right now with the wedding expenses. We thought family would be easier." Family. The word they'd threatened to revoke 6 months ago. "I need to think about it," I said. "What's there to think about?" Mom's voice shifted from sweet to sharp. "We're your parents. We need help. That's what family does for each other." "I'll call you back," I said, and hung up before she could argue. Sat on my couch, knee aching slightly from a long day at work, and thought about everything that had happened. They'd threatened to disown me for choosing my health, had ignored me through surgery and months of recovery, hadn't checked on me once to see if I was okay, if the surgery was successful, if I needed anything, and now they needed money. So suddenly I was family again. Called Hannah, told her about the conversation. "You're not actually considering giving them money, right?" she asked. "Please tell me you're not considering it." "I don't know," I admitted. "He's still my father. If he needs medical care, They didn't care about your medical care, Hannah interrupted. They told you to risk permanent disability for a party. They don't get to play the family card now that they need something. She was right. I knew she was right. But there was this voice in my head, that childhood conditioning about family obligations and doing the right thing. What would you do? I asked her. I'd tell them to reschedule their bills. That made me laugh despite everything. Hannah had always been good at cutting through emotional manipulation with pure logic. Spent the next day thinking about it. Went to work, gave a tour to a school group, processed some new acquisitions for the collection. Normal stuff. But my mind kept circling back to that phone call. They needed money. I had money. But giving it to them felt like validating everything they'd done, like saying their treatment of me was acceptable as long as I was still useful. Mom called again that evening. Have you made a decision? I need more information, I said. What was the emergency procedure? Does it matter? Yes. She sighed, annoyed. Fine. Your father needed kidney stone surgery. It was very painful and required immediate intervention. Kidney stone surgery. Painful, yes, but not life-threatening. Not something that would cause permanent disability if delayed. Elective in the medical terminology they'd used against me. And you need exactly $15,000? Yes. That's what we're short after insurance and other expenses. When's it due? The hospital wants payment within 30 days or they'll send it to collections. 30 days. They had 30 days to figure it out. Can't you set up a payment plan with the hospital? We tried. They're not being flexible. We need the money. But what about a personal loan? I told you, our credit isn't great right now. Please stop asking questions and just help us. That tone. The one that said I was being difficult for wanting basic information before handing over $15,000. I'll think about it, I said. What's there to think about? Mom's voice rose. This is your father's health. How can you be so cold? I had major surgery 6 months ago, I said quietly. Reconstructive surgery that determined whether I'd be disabled for the rest of my life. You didn't call once to check on me. You didn't ask how I was doing or if I needed anything. You chose a party over my health. Now you're asking me to choose your financial problems over my financial security. That's completely different, Mom said immediately. You were being selfish about the wedding. This is a real emergency. My surgery was a real emergency. It wasn't the same thing. Bethany's wedding was important, and my ability to walk wasn't. Silence. Then, are you going to help us or not? I took a breath, thought about all those months of recovery. The pain, the struggle, the isolation. Thought about them dancing at a wedding while I learned to walk again. Thought about the ultimatum, the threats, the complete dismissal of my needs. No, I said. I'm not going to help you. What? I'm not giving you money. You told me to reschedule my surgery. I'm telling you to reschedule your bills. Figure it out like I had to figure everything out on my own. You can't be serious, Mom said, voice shaking. After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me? Because from where I'm sitting, you spent $32,000 on Bethany's wedding but couldn't be bothered to ask how my surgery went. We raised you. We gave you everything. You gave Bethany everything, I corrected. I was an afterthought, and that's fine. I've made peace with it. But you don't get to treat me like I'm not family and then expect me to act like family when it's convenient for you. If you don't help us, we're done, Mom said, voice cold. This is your last chance. You already told me we were done 6 months ago, I said. Nothing's changed. Goodbye, Mom. I hung up. Then I blocked her number, blocked Dad's number, blocked Bethany's number, blocked every family member who'd sided with them or ignored what had happened. The phone rang twice more from unknown numbers. I didn't answer. Hannah called an hour later. So, what happened? I said no. Good. How do you feel? Honestly? Free. And I did. For the first time in 6 months, maybe for the first time in my whole life, I felt like I'd actually stood up for myself, set a boundary, and enforced it. Chosen my own well-being over their demands. The next week was chaos I didn't see directly because I'd blocked everyone. But my aunt called from her number I hadn't blocked yet. Your mother is losing her mind, she reported. She's calling everyone saying you refused to help your father with emergency medical bills, making you sound like a monster. He can set up a payment plan with the hospital, I said. They're not going to sue him over $15,000 in medical debt. I know that. You know that. But she's spinning this into a huge drama about ungrateful children and family betrayal. She told me I'd be dead to them if I chose surgery over the wedding. I know. And I think you did the right thing. I just wanted to warn you that she's on a campaign to turn the whole family against you. Let her, I said. Anyone who believes her version without asking mine isn't worth having in my life anyway. My aunt was quiet for a moment. Then, you sound different. Stronger. I had to be. They made sure of that. A few cousins reached out, ones who'd heard Mom's version and wanted mine. I explained once, calmly and clearly. Sent screenshots of the pre-surgery text I'd sent to my parents in February, the medical documentation from Dr. Patterson, the timeline showing they'd known about my surgery for 4 months before scheduling the wedding on the same day. Some believed me, some didn't. Some didn't care either way. I made peace with all of it. Bethany tried calling from Dylan's phone. I answered that one time just to make my position clear. "You're really not going to help them?" she asked. "Over a wedding? Over you all choosing a wedding over my health?" I corrected. "And then ghosting me for 6 months. And then only contacting me when you needed money. Family helps family." "You're right. Family does help family. When my sister was getting married, I wanted to be there. But I physically couldn't because I was having major surgery. Family would have understood that. Family would have chosen a different date, or at least checked on me afterward. You all made it clear I'm not really family unless I'm useful to you. That's not fair. Neither was telling me to reschedule surgery that determined whether I'd be disabled for life. It wasn't that serious." "Yes, it was. You just didn't care." I hung up, blocked that number too. Hannah came over that weekend with wine and takeout. We sat on my couch, the same couch where I'd spent months recovering alone, and she asked how I was really doing. "Better than expected," I said honestly. "I thought I'd feel guilty, like I was being as bad as them by refusing to help. But I don't. They made their choice. They told me what I was worth to them. I'm just respecting their decision. What do you think they'll do? I don't know. Dad will probably set up a payment plan with the hospital like a normal person. Mom will probably complain to everyone who'll listen. Bethany will go on with her newlywed life, and I'll keep building the life I have here. Without them. Without them." Hannah raised her glass. "To family we choose instead of family we're born into." We clinked glasses. My knee was sore from a long day at work, but it was a normal sore, not the debilitating pain I'd lived with for 3 years. I could walk. I could work. I could have a life. That's what I'd chosen. And 6 months later, faced with their crisis, I'd chosen it again. 3 months after the phone call stopped, I got a letter in the mail. Not from my parents directly, but from an attorney. For a moment, my stomach dropped thinking they were suing me for the money. But it wasn't that. It was a formal notice that they'd added me back into their will. Apparently, their attorney had advised them that disinheriting a child could lead to legal challenges and estate complications. So I was back in, but with a significantly reduced share compared to Bethany. She'd get the house and most of the assets. I'd get a small cash amount, maybe $20,000. Hannah looked at the letter and laughed. "They're bribing you from beyond the grave? That's actually impressive." "I don't want their money," I said. "Good, but take it if they die and donate it to a medical charity or something. Spite donations are the best donations." The thought made me smile. Life went on. I got that promotion at work, became the new educational programs coordinator, started planning an exhibit about overcoming physical challenges, inspired partly by my own experience, made new friends through work, went on some dates, built a life that had nothing to do with my family of origin. My knee never fully stopped hurting. Dr. Patterson had warned me that even with successful surgery, I'd probably have some level of chronic pain and stiffness, but it was manageable. I could work, exercise, live normally. That's all I'd wanted. A year after the surgery, almost to the day, I was leading a tour through the museum when I saw my mother standing at the edge of the group, just watching, not participating, not trying to talk to me, just there. I finished the tour professionally, ignoring her presence. After the group dispersed, she approached. "Your knee looks better," she said. "You're not limping." "The surgery was successful," I said neutrally. "Is there something you need?" "I wanted to see how you were doing." "I'm fine." "The exhibit on physical challenges is yours, isn't it?" "I saw your name listed as coordinator." "Yes." We stood there in the gallery, surrounded by artifacts and information panels about human resilience and adaptation. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. "I owe you an apology," Mom said finally. "We handled everything wrong. The wedding, the surgery, all of it. We prioritized the wrong things." I waited. She seemed to expect me to immediately forgive her, to say it was okay, to fall back into old patterns. "I was in pain for 3 years," I said instead. "The surgery could have prevented permanent damage if I'd gotten it sooner, but I waited because of insurance approval processes and work schedules and trying to time it right. When I finally got approval and a surgery date, you asked me to risk everything for a party." "It wasn't just a party." "It was," I interrupted. "It was a party. It was an expensive, elaborate party, but just a party. My surgery was my health, my career, my future. And you chose the party. Mom's eyes watered. I know. I was wrong. You told me I'd be dead to you if I didn't come to the wedding. I was angry. You were honest. That's what I was worth to you. So I believed you. But you wouldn't even help when your father needed medical care, she said, defensive edge creeping back in. He needed money, not medical care. Medical care was available to him through payment plans. You wanted me to hand over money I'd saved through years of work because you overspent on Bethany's wedding. We're your parents. You're people who gave birth to me and raised me. That doesn't mean I owe you access to my bank account, especially after you made it clear I wasn't worth your time when I needed you. Mom straightened her shoulders. I came here to apologize and try to rebuild our relationship. I appreciate the apology, I said, but I don't want to rebuild the relationship. I spent my whole life trying to earn love and approval that was only given to Bethany. I'm done trying. I have people in my life now who actually value me. I don't need the stress of wondering when I'll be second priority again. You're my daughter. And you made it clear what that meant. I'm respecting your decision. I walked away, back to my office where I had work to do on an exhibit about strength and resilience. Left her standing in the gallery. She didn't follow, didn't call again. I think she finally understood that I meant what I said. Hannah called that evening asking how I was doing. I told her about the museum encounter. How do you feel? She asked. Like I finally closed a door that should have been closed a year ago. Good. You want company? Always. She came over with Thai food, and we watched terrible reality TV, the kind where people make dramatic problems out of nothing. It was mindless and perfect. My knee ached a little that night, same as it did most nights, but I had pain medication that worked. I had a job I loved. I had friends who actually cared about me. I had a life built on my own terms, not dictated by family obligation and one-sided loyalty. That's what I'd chosen on June 15th when I went into surgery instead of a wedding. And every day since, I'd kept choosing it. Choosing myself, my health, my future, my peace. They'd told me to reschedule my surgery. Instead, I'd rescheduled my entire relationship with them. Turns out, that was the best decision I ever made. My knee works now. I can walk without pain. I can work full days. I can climb stairs. I can have a normal life. And I can do all of that without a family who only valued me when I was useful to them. Sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is choose your own well-being over other people's expectations, even when those people are family, especially when those people are family. My surgery was June 15th. The wedding was June 15th. I made my choice. They made theirs. And we all have to live with the consequences. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks. My parents said, if your brother's not invited, we're not coming. Now they've lost every kid they ignored for him. What's up, Reddit? I was the family punching bag while my older brother got treated like royalty for doing absolutely nothing. I finally broke free, built my own life, and thought I was done with all that garbage. Turns out my family had other plans. Let me take you back to where this whole mess started. I'm Travis. Grew up in a small town in Indiana with my older brother Matt, my younger sister Natalia, and our parents. Matt was 2 years older than me, and from the very beginning, it was obvious he was the favorite. Not subtle either, like painfully obvious to anyone with functioning eyes. It all started because Matt was good at football, not just school team good. People in town genuinely believed he might land a college scholarship someday. Coaches praised him constantly. Neighbors talked about him like he was already headed for the NFL. And my parents ate up every single word. Every time Matt scored a touchdown, my mom acted like she was the one out there running plays. My dad called him our ticket to the big time. Meanwhile, I was just there, existing in the background like furniture nobody noticed until they needed to move it. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't some friendless loner kid hiding in my room. I had buddies. I did decent in school, played video games, normal stuff. But compared to Matt, it was like I was completely invisible. He was loud, confident, always the center of attention. I was quieter, more into drawing and music, not really interested in sports. And apparently, that was enough for Matt to start treating me like his personal punching bag from day one. He'd take my stuff without asking, call me soft in front of his friends, make fun of my clothes, my hair, the way I talked. And if I ever got mad about it, he'd laugh like I was the crazy one for being upset. My parents had the same reaction every single time. Boys will be boys. That was their favorite line. Like Matt physically could not help himself from being a jerk, and I just needed to accept it. One of my earliest memories of Matt showing his true colors was my 10th birthday party. I had a few friends over from school. We were in the backyard eating cake, having a good time, and Matt decided that was the perfect moment to dump an entire bucket of cold water on my head in front of everyone. Ruined my cake, got my presents wet. Kids laughed awkwardly because they didn't know what else to do, and Matt stood there grinning like he just won the Super Bowl. I ran inside crying. My mom told me I was overreacting. My dad said I needed to lighten up and learn to take a joke. Matt didn't even get in trouble. Didn't even get a stern look. Nothing. That was the pattern for pretty much my entire childhood. Matt could do whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. If he broke something, it was an accident. If he insulted someone, it was just a joke. And if I ever dared to snap back, I was the problem. I was the one who needed to calm down. By the time I hit middle school, I started noticing other people could see it too. Teachers would pull me aside and ask why Matt was so mean to me sometimes. One of our neighbors straight up told my mom that Matt shouldn't pick on me so much. Mom laughed it off like the lady was being ridiculous. Nothing to see here, just brothers being brothers. Matt only got worse as he got older. It wasn't just teasing anymore. He was actively trying to humiliate me whenever he could. One time in 8th grade, he told my crush that I still slept with a nightlight, which wasn't even true. But she believed him, and she stopped talking to me for weeks. When I told Mom what happened, she just said he was teasing and didn't mean anything by it. Natalia was still pretty young back then, maybe 6 or 7, so she wasn't really involved in any of it. Matt mostly ignored her. Sometimes she'd tell him to leave me alone, but she didn't have any power in that house either. Nobody did except Matt and the parents who worshipped him. The golden boy treatment really hit its peak once Matt started high school football. Suddenly, everything in our lives revolved around his games. Family vacations got canceled because of tournaments. Dinners were scheduled around his practices. My parents wore his jersey to the grocery store like he was already a professional athlete. Meanwhile, I was getting rides to art class from my friends' parents because Mom and Dad were too busy with Matt's schedule. The thing is, Matt wasn't even close to being a perfect son outside of football. He barely passed his classes, talked back to teachers constantly, partied with his friends on weekends, got into minor trouble here and there. And still, my parents treated him like he walked on water. Like his ability to throw a ball meant he could do no wrong in any other area of his life. And me? I kept my head down, got decent grades, never got in trouble at school, stayed out of drama, didn't matter. None of it mattered. By the time I was 14, I completely stopped telling my parents when Matt did something messed up. There was no point. They weren't going to do anything about it except make me feel worse for bringing it up. One night at dinner, Matt made a joke about how I was probably going to end up living in Mom and Dad's basement forever. Everyone at the table laughed except me. I just sat there eating, counting down the years until I could finally get out. Funny thing is, years later, that basement comment would come back to bite him harder than anyone predicted. By the time I hit high school, I'd already learned the unspoken rules of our household. Matt did whatever he wanted. Mom and Dad defended him no matter what, and I stayed in the background trying not to make waves. But high school somehow made everything worse. Matt had more freedom now. A car, a bigger friend group, more opportunities to make my life miserable in creative new ways. One of the first things he did my freshman year was take my bike. Said he needed it because his car wasn't starting. That was a lie. He rode it to a friend's house, left it outside overnight, and it got stolen. When I told Mom and Dad, their response was classic. Well, you should have locked it up better. Like I was the one who left it there. I'd saved up the entire summer mowing lawns to buy that bike. Then there was my first real date. I was 16. This girl Kayla from my math class agreed to go to the movies with me. I was nervous but excited. Everything was going fine until Matt showed up at the same theater with a group of his friends. Halfway through the movie, we went to the lobby for snacks, and Matt spotted us immediately. He started yelling across the lobby so everyone could hear. Hey, Travis, don't get nervous now, man. Don't cry if she holds your hand. His buddies were dying laughing. Kayla was so embarrassed she barely spoke to me for the rest of the night. When I told Mom about it later, expecting at least some sympathy, she said Matt was just teasing and didn't mean anything by it. Same line I'd heard 100 times before. At that point, I was pretty convinced Matt could literally burn the house down, and they'd find a way to blame the wind. The big turning point came during Matt's junior year of high school. He was 17. I was 15. Up until then, football had been the entire gravitational center of our household. Everything orbited around Matt's games, Matt's practices, Matt's potential scholarship offers. He was the star, the future college athlete, the one everyone thought was destined for greatness. Then one random afternoon, after getting into some argument with his coach about playing time, Matt quit the team, just walked out mid-season, told everyone he was focusing on his future. Whatever that meant coming from a 17-year-old who'd never focused on anything except football his entire life. Turns out his future involved sleeping until noon, staying up all night playing video games, and hanging out with his buddies doing nothing productive. He spent the rest of junior year and all of senior year basically living in the basement, like some kind of nocturnal creature. My parents kept telling relatives he was taking a break before college scouts came calling. Nobody called. Not a single school. Not even community college recruiters. Meanwhile, I was actually doing fine. Sophomore year, I joined the music club, got a part-time job at a pizza place called Joey's. Tried to stay out of the way while Matt drifted around the house acting like the world owed him something for existing. But Matt couldn't leave me alone even when he had nothing going on. Maybe especially because he had nothing going on. He started messing with my stuff constantly. He'd go into my room when I wasn't home, take things, hide them, sometimes break them for fun. The worst incident was the guitar I'd saved up an entire year to buy. Came home from school one day and found it snapped in two pieces on the floor. Matt claimed he accidentally bumped it off the stand. An accident? Sure. Mom told me I should have put it somewhere safer. I completely lost it that time. First and only time I actually shoved him. He shoved me back. We started yelling. Things escalated fast. Dad came in and broke it up. And guess who got grounded? Me. Because Matt told them I started it. Even threw in some fake tears for good measure, saying I was always mad at him for no reason. I remember standing there thinking this guy could literally rob a bank, and somehow it would be my fault for not stopping him. After that, I started working extra hours at the pizza place. Partly because I wanted money to save for college, partly because every hour I spent there was an hour I didn't have to spend at home. My boss, this ex-military guy named Joe, liked me because I showed up on time and actually worked hard. Sometimes I'd volunteer for closing shifts just to avoid family dinners. Any excuse to be somewhere else. At home, everything still revolved around Matt. Even though he wasn't doing anything. Even though he'd thrown away his one actual talent. My parents still acted like any day now. Big opportunities would magically appear. Colleges would line up to recruit their special boy. The reality was he barely graduated. His GPA was garbage. No sports teams wanted him. He had no plan, no backup, no clue what he was doing with his life. The night of Matt's graduation party was when things really exploded. Mom and Dad threw this huge backyard bash and invited half the neighborhood. Matt was strutting around like he was king of the world, accepting congratulations for an achievement that should have been the bare minimum expectation. Someone asked him about his college plans, and he said he was keeping his options open, like he was in high demand or something, like schools were fighting over him. Later that night, I overheard him telling a group of people that I was probably going to be stuck living at home forever. That was rich. Coming from the guy with no job, no college acceptance letters, and no plan beyond his next gaming session. I didn't say anything then, but I remember thinking to myself, one day, this whole golden boy fantasy is going to blow up in their faces. And it did. It absolutely did. I moved out the same week I graduated high school, packed up everything I owned, threw it in my car, and drove 3 hours to Purdue University without looking back. Mom cried like I was abandoning the family by going to college. Dad said, "Don't forget where you came from," which was hilarious coming from the guy who couldn't name a single one of my classes or hobbies because he was too busy obsessing over Matt's football stats for years. Matt didn't even bother to see me off. He was still asleep when I left that morning. Typical. College felt like freedom in a way I'd never experienced before. No one yelling at me. No one breaking my stuff. No parents acting like I was invisible unless they needed something. I got to work, studied hard, landed a job at the campus library, joined the music club, made actual friends who didn't treat me like garbage. For the first time in my life, I could walk around without constantly bracing for someone to mess with me just because they felt like it. Meanwhile, back home, Matt's life was already starting to crumble. Remember how he was supposed to be the big football star? The one with all the potential? Yeah, that dream died fast. He signed up for community college classes but barely showed up. Quit after one semester and told everyone school just wasn't for him. What he was really doing was sleeping until noon every day, playing Xbox all night, and mooching off Mom and Dad indefinitely. They still acted like he was special. He just needs time, Mom would tell relatives whenever anyone asked what Matt was doing. He's keeping his options open, Dad said. Like Matt was some free agent athlete weighing offers from multiple teams instead of an unemployed 20-year-old living rent-free in his childhood bedroom. I stayed out of it as much as possible. I had my own life to build, finally. And I wasn't about to waste energy arguing with them about Matt's failures. But every time I went home for holidays, Matt found a way to start something. The worst was Christmas my sophomore year. I brought my girlfriend at the time, Rachel, home to meet my family. I warned her about Matt beforehand, but she didn't really understand until she witnessed him in action. We were sitting in the living room just having a normal conversation, and out of nowhere Matt goes, "Hey Rachel, did Travis tell you he used to cry every time he lost at Mario Kart?" Everyone laughed. Then he added, "Don't get him too excited tonight, he might cry again." Rachel looked mortified. I was furious. And Mom told me to stop being so sensitive when I asked Matt to knock it off. That was the last time Rachel came home with me for the holidays. Can't really blame her. Natalia wasn't home much either during those years. When she turned 18, she started college in New York. Think she saw how toxic things were at home and decided distance was the only solution. She didn't come back for fall break her freshman year. Skipped a few holidays. When Mom complained about it, Natalia just said she was too busy with school. Matt accused her of betraying the family, told anyone who would listen that Natalia thought she was too good for them now. Funny thing was, Natalia actually stayed in touch with me way more than she did with our parents. She'd call me regularly to talk about her classes, her new friends, her boyfriend Daniel. We actually built a real relationship once we were both out of that house. By the time I was a junior, Matt was 22 and still living at home. No job, no education, no plan whatsoever. He worked at a car wash for 2 months and quit because the boss was a jerk. Tried landscaping for 1 summer and quit because it was too hot outside. Every single time he quit something, Mom made excuses. He just hasn't found the right fit yet. Like he was some delicate flower who needed the perfect conditions to bloom instead of a grown adult who needed to get his act together. Dad started pressuring me around that time about not visiting home often enough. Said the family was drifting apart because Natalia and I were too busy with our own lives. I told him maybe if things at home weren't constantly revolving around Matt and his problems, people would actually want to be there. He didn't appreciate that answer. The summer before my senior year at Purdue, I went home for a few weeks to work a temp job and save some money. Figured I could tolerate the situation for a short stretch. I was wrong. One night at dinner, Matt started making comments about how I thought I was better than everyone just because I was in college. I tried ignoring him at first, but he wouldn't let up. Kept going and going. Said my degree was going to be useless. Said I'd probably end up working at a gas station like half the people with degrees. Just kept poking and poking. I finally snapped. At least I won't be living in Mom and Dad's basement at 23, with no job and no clue what I'm doing with my life. Dead silence at the table. Dad told me to apologize. I laughed and said no, because I wasn't wrong about anything I'd said. Matt got mad, picked up a dinner roll, and threw it at my head across the table like we were 5 years old. I stood up, walked out, and drove back to campus the next morning, even though summer classes hadn't started yet. That was the last time I stayed at my parents' house for longer than a single weekend. After that, holidays were hit or miss. Sometimes I showed up for a quick visit. Sometimes I didn't bother at all. Natalia was even worse about coming home than I was. Mom kept saying the family was falling apart. I privately thought maybe it was just finally falling into its natural place. Broken pieces settling where they belonged. Natalia met Daniel during her junior year in New York. By then, Matt was 27. I was 25. The gap between our lives and his had never felt bigger. Natalia called me about a month after they started dating, sounding happier than I'd ever heard her. Said Daniel was smart, funny, had a good job lined up after graduation, and actually listened when she talked. Revolutionary concept in our family. I met him the following summer when they drove through Indiana on a road trip. Daniel was one of those guys who didn't need to say much to make a good impression. Confident, but not arrogant. Shook my hand firmly. Asked about my life. Even brought my parents some fancy coffee from New York as a gift. Mom loved him immediately. Dad did too. Matt didn't. First time they met, Daniel casually asked Matt what he was doing for work these days. Matt mumbled something vague about taking time to figure things out. Daniel just nodded politely and changed the subject. You could tell Matt absolutely hated not being the most impressive person in the room for one. Someone else was getting attention and respect, and he couldn't stand it. Christmas rolled around that year. First time the whole family was together in over a year. Me, Natalia, Daniel, Mom, Dad, and of course, Matt. From the start, Matt was trying way too hard to act like the big man, bragging about his old football glory days, talking over people, cracking dumb jokes that nobody laughed at. Most of the actual conversation was between Natalia, Daniel, and me catching up on real-life stuff. You could practically see Matt's irritation building. He hated not being the center of attention. Absolutely could not tolerate it. That's when he pulled his classic move. We were all sitting in the living room after dinner. Natalia got up to grab dessert from the kitchen. Matt followed her in, and a minute later he came walking back out holding this huge bowl of water, grinning like an idiot, clearly planning to dump it on her when she walked through the doorway. Before Matt could even move, Daniel stepped directly in front of him. Calm voice, steady posture, put it back. Matt laughed nervously, trying to play it off. It's just for fun, relax. Daniel didn't budge an inch. I said, put it back. Matt froze. Probably because he realized for the first time that Daniel wasn't like me or Natalia. He wasn't going to shrug it off and let Matt do whatever he wanted. He wasn't intimidated by Matt either. Daniel leaned slightly closer. You throw that water, and you and I are going to have a serious problem. Matt stared at him for a long moment. Then he slowly set the bowl down on the counter and walked off without saying another word, like nothing happened. Natalia came back into the room, noticed the bowl sitting there, gave me a confused look. I just shook my head. Mom immediately tried to smooth everything over. Matt was only joking around. Daniel didn't even look at her. Doesn't seem very funny to me. The mood shifted hard after that. Matt stayed quiet the rest of the night. Natalia and Daniel left early, said they were tired from traveling. Next day, Mom called me privately to say Daniel had overreacted and Matt was just being playful like he always was. I told her maybe if she'd bothered to tell Matt to knock it off when we were kids, he wouldn't still be acting like a 12-year-old at 27 years old. She didn't like that response. Over the next year, Natalia visited home less and less. Sometimes skipped holidays completely. Mom complained constantly, said Natalia was too wrapped up in her new boyfriend to care about family anymore. The truth was simpler than that. She just didn't want to deal with Matt or the endless drama surrounding him. Neither did I. A year after that Christmas incident, Natalia called me with big news. Daniel proposed. She sounded genuinely excited, but also nervous. I asked what was wrong. She hesitated before answering. I don't want Matt at the wedding. I wasn't even slightly surprised. After everything that happened over the years, it made perfect sense. She had every right to want her wedding day to be peaceful instead of another Matt-centered disaster. What about Mom and Dad? I asked. She sighed. I'll invite them. But if they try to make this about Matt, they can stay home too. This is my day, not his. When she told our parents the plan, things went exactly how we both expected. Mom said she was being completely unfair. Dad said weddings were family events, and Matt absolutely should be there. They argued with her for weeks, called her selfish, accused her of trying to split the family apart. Classic manipulation tactic. Natalia didn't budge once. He's not invited. End of story. That's my decision, and it's final. Then the rumors started. Someone heard through the grapevine that Matt might show up anyway. One of his friends mentioned at the gym that Matt was planning to crash the wedding, because nobody tells him where he can or can't go. Because of course he'd make it about himself. Couldn't let his little sister have one single day without him being the center of attention. Natalia wasn't scared, but she also wasn't taking any chances. Daniel had 2 college buddies who worked as cops. They volunteered to attend the wedding and keep an eye on things, just in case. That's when I decided to visit Mom and Dad before the ceremony. I was completely done being quiet about all of this. Years of favoritism, excuses, and defending Matt's behavior, no matter what he did, had piled up to the breaking point. This time, they weren't going to talk their way out of it. I drove home 2 weeks before the wedding, because I knew things were spiraling out of control. Mom had been blowing up my phone nonstop about how Natalia was destroying the family. Dad left me a voicemail saying the wedding was a disgrace without Matt being included. When I walked into the house, Mom started in immediately. She can't seriously expect us to come if Matt's not even invited. I told her that was exactly what Natalia expected, and she had every right to expect it. She's your sister. Mom said, like that was some kind of checkmate argument. You should be talking sense into her. Number 1, I said firmly, she doesn't want him there, and she has every right after everything he's done to both of us over the years. End of discussion. Mom looked at me like I'd started speaking another language. That night at dinner, Dad joined the campaign. Your mother's really upset about all this. Natalia needs to reconsider her position. I set my fork down hard. Why? So Matt can ruin her wedding day like he's ruined every holiday and family gathering for the past 20 years? Dad leaned back in his chair, frowning. He's her brother. Yeah, I said. And he spent over 2 decades treating her and me like garbage while you two looked the other way and made excuses for him. That's a fact. Mom told me to watch my tone. I told them maybe they should have watched Matt's behavior 10 years ago, when it might have actually made a difference. Then I asked them something that shut the entire table up. What exactly has Matt done with his life? I said. He's in his mid-20s. No job, no education, no plans, lives here rent-free. And you still treat him like he's some kind of gift from heaven. Why? Dad started with his usual defense. Matt just needs more time to figure things out. He's had time, I said. All of it. Handed to him on a silver platter, while you blamed everyone else for his screw-ups. And now you expect Natalia to risk her wedding day turning into another one of his disasters? That's not happening. Mom's face went red. Dad told me I was being disrespectful to them in their own house. Number 1, I said. What's actually disrespectful is you two acting like Matt deserves everything and Natalia owes him a place at her wedding after the way he's treated her. She doesn't owe him anything. Nobody said a word for a solid minute after that. The next day, Mom called Natalia directly for one last attempt at changing her mind. Natalia didn't budge even slightly. If you bring him to my wedding, don't bother coming at all, Natalia told her. Those are your options. That sent Mom into a full meltdown. She accused Natalia of deliberately humiliating the family. Natalia told her she was done arguing and hung up the phone. Meanwhile, Matt was running his mouth to anyone who would listen, saying he was definitely going to show up anyway. One of his friends told someone that Matt planned to bring a couple of buddies with him and wasn't going to let his own sister ban him like some stranger off the street. When I told Natalia about the threat, she didn't even sound surprised. Daniel's friends will handle it if he tries anything. I'm not letting him ruin this day. 2 days before the wedding, I went back to my parents' house one more time, just to make absolutely clear where I stood on everything. You know, if Matt crashes the wedding, they're calling the police, right? I said bluntly. Mom glared at me. He wouldn't actually do that. He would, I said. Because you've spent his entire life letting him believe he can do whatever he wants without consequences. This is what you built. Dad crossed his arms defensively. You think you're better than your brother just because you went to college? No, I said evenly. I think I'm better than him because I don't spend my time making other people's lives miserable for my own entertainment. That's the difference. That's when Dad said something I'll never forget. If your sister keeps this up with Matt, your mother and I might not go to the wedding either. I actually laughed out loud. Then don't. Seriously. Go ahead and stay home. You can watch Matt sit in this house for the next 30 years while you keep pretending he's your special little star. Nobody's going to miss you at the wedding if you can't respect Natalia's decision. That's a promise. Dad told me to get out of his house. I said fine. But before I walked out the door, I turned back one last time. You know what the saddest part of all this is? Natalia's marrying a guy who treats her better than her own family ever did. Think about that. Neither of them said a single word as I left. On my way to my car, I saw Matt standing in the driveway, leaning against his vehicle with a smirk on his face. Big wedding coming up, he said. Maybe I'll crash it and make a speech. I stopped walking and looked him directly in the eyes. You show up there and you'll be leaving with a police escort. Try it if you want to find out. His smirk faded just a little bit. The day before the wedding, Mom texted me saying they still hadn't decided if they were coming or not. I told her to let me know either way so I could warn Natalia ahead of time. She didn't respond. That night, Natalia called me. If they show up with Matt, they're all getting removed. Daniel already briefed the venue staff on the situation. You think they'll actually try it? I asked. She paused for a long moment. Honestly, I wouldn't put anything past them at this point. The wedding was Saturday afternoon at this beautiful outdoor venue about an hour from our hometown. Natalia and Daniel had intentionally kept everything small and intimate. Close friends. A few relatives who weren't part of the drama. No massive guest list that would be hard to manage if problems arose. I got there early because Natalia wanted me keeping her updated in real time if anything happened with Mom, Dad, or Matt. Daniel's 2 cop friends were already there, dressed like regular wedding guests but strategically positioned to watch the entrance. By noon, guests were arriving steadily. No sign of my parents or Matt anywhere. At 1 o'clock, Natalia came out from the bridal suite looking stressed. Mom texted me. She's saying they might be running late. Just her and Dad? I asked carefully. She shook her head slowly. She didn't specify who. Daniel walked over, calm and steady as always. We've got people watching the entrance. If Matt shows up, they won't even make it past the parking lot. Don't worry. Natalia nodded, but didn't look entirely convinced. Half an hour before the ceremony was supposed to start, Mom finally texted me directly. We're not coming. Not without your brother. I showed Natalia the message. She didn't even blink. Didn't look upset. Just nodded once. Okay, she said calmly. Then Grandpa's walking me down the aisle instead. And that was that. No tears. No second guessing. No last-minute change of heart. She was completely done with all of them. The ceremony started exactly on time. Grandpa walked Natalia down the aisle while Mom and Dad were presumably sitting at home with Matt, convincing themselves they were the real victims in this situation. The whole thing was absolutely perfect. Natalia looked genuinely happy. Daniel couldn't stop smiling. And everyone actually present was celebrating instead of managing some manufactured crisis for once. But the peace didn't last long. Right after the ceremony ended, while guests were walking toward the reception tent, one of Daniel's cop friends approached me quickly. Heads up. Matt's car just pulled into the parking lot. Natalia overheard him. You've got to be kidding me. Daniel put his arm around her protectively. Go enjoy your reception. We'll handle this. Trust me. I followed the cop over to the parking lot. Matt was climbing out of his car with 2 of his buddies. None of them were even dressed for a wedding. Matt was wearing jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt, like he was showing up to some backyard barbecue instead of his sister's wedding. Turn around, the cop said firmly, before Matt even finished shutting his car door. You're not welcome here. Matt smirked. I'm here for my sister's wedding. You're not invited, the cop said. Leave now. Matt looked past him directly at me. You're really going to let them do this to your own brother? I stared right back at him. You've had months to actually get invited by being a decent person. You chose not to. Take the hint. One of Matt's buddies muttered something about how family is family. The cop held up his hand firmly. You take one step past this parking lot. You're trespassing on private property. That's your choice to make. Matt glared at me with pure hatred in his eyes. This is all because of you. You turned everyone against me. I actually laughed. She's been done with you for years, Matt. You were just too self-absorbed to notice. For a second, I genuinely thought he was going to try something stupid. But then Daniel walked up beside me. He wasn't yelling. Didn't need to. His presence alone changed the energy completely. You need to leave, Daniel said, voice calm but absolutely firm. Right now. If you step past this parking lot, you're trespassing. And security will make sure you're escorted out in a way you won't enjoy. Matt's smirk finally cracked. He looked at his two buddies, probably realizing neither of them actually wanted to spend the night getting arrested over his tantrum. This isn't over, he muttered as he got back in his car. Yeah, I said. It really is, though. They drove off. Back at the reception, nobody even mentioned the parking lot incident to Natalia. She danced, laughed, took pictures, enjoyed her wedding day exactly like she deserved. Daniel kept a watchful eye on things the rest of the evening, but Matt never came back. Later that night, when things were winding down and guests were starting to leave, Mom finally texted Natalia again. We can't believe you would embarrass the family like this on your wedding day. Natalia didn't even bother responding. She just handed me her phone. You deal with them. I'm done. I texted back from her phone. She didn't embarrass anyone. You embarrassed yourselves by choosing Matt over your daughter for 20 years straight. Don't contact her tonight. She's celebrating. Mom didn't respond after that. After the wedding officially ended, a few of us stayed behind to help clean up the venue. Natalia hugged me tight before leaving for her honeymoon. Thanks for having my back through all of this, she said. Always. I told her. That's what family is actually supposed to do. On the drive home, I kept waiting for my phone to blow up with angry calls from Mom or Dad. Nothing came through until the next morning. Dad's voicemail was furious. Said I turned my sister against the family. I deleted it without calling back. 2 days after the wedding, Mom sent a long text demanding an apology for excluding Matt. I didn't reply. Natalia didn't either. A week later, Dad left another angry voicemail. Same script he'd been running for years. I deleted that one too. Natalia blocked both of them. Matt tried calling me once. Left a rambling message saying I was jealous of him. Jealous of what? He didn't say. By fall, Matt had started some pyramid scheme, selling overpriced energy drinks. Told everyone he'd be rich in 6 months. That lasted 3 weeks before he quit. Then he tried selling car detailing services out of the garage. That lasted 2 weeks. Then he got into cryptocurrency and lost what little money he had saved. Mom and Dad bailed him out. Again. Meanwhile, Natalia and Daniel bought a house in upstate New York. She got promoted to senior analyst. They threw a housewarming party. I drove up with my girlfriend and spent the whole weekend there. Daniel's parents came too. Good food. Good people. No drama. That Christmas, Natalia hosted dinner at her new place. She invited me, my girlfriend, a few cousins, Daniel's family, and Grandpa. She didn't invite Mom, Dad, or Matt. Christmas morning, Mom sent a group text saying the family used to be close before certain people got involved. Nobody responded. 2 months later, Matt wrecked Dad's truck, borrowed it without asking, took it joyriding with his buddies, and wrapped it around a telephone pole. He walked away fine, but the truck was totaled. Insurance didn't cover everything. Dad paid $4,000 out of pocket. That spring, Matt got fired from a warehouse job for showing up late 3 times in 1 week. Then he got fired from a restaurant for arguing with a manager. Then he quit a landscaping gig because the hours were too early. Dad got sick that summer. Nothing life-threatening, but bad enough that he couldn't work for 3 months. Mom called me asking for help with bills. I asked if Matt had gotten a job yet. She hesitated. He's trying. I told her I hoped Dad recovered, but I wasn't moving back and I wasn't sending money. She hung up on me. The following spring, Natalia had her first baby, a boy named James. Mom and Dad still hadn't met him. Natalia told them they could visit if they apologized for the wedding and admitted they'd been wrong about Matt for years. They refused. Said they wouldn't be blackmailed. So Daniel's parents became the only grandparents James would know. They drove up from New Jersey every month to visit, brought toys, helped with babysitting, took 1 million pictures. Meanwhile, Mom and Dad sat at home with Matt and missed everything. Last fall, Matt got arrested. Reckless driving. He ran a red light doing 50 in a 30 zone and T-boned another car in an intersection. Nobody was seriously hurt, but the other driver's car was totaled. Matt spent the night in jail. Mom and Dad paid his bail, paid his lawyer, paid the settlement to avoid a lawsuit. His license got suspended for a year. A month after that, Mom called me. said they were rewriting their will, hinted that they were leaving everything to Matt because he needs it most. I told her that was fine. She sounded surprised. You don't care? I said no, because he'll burn through it in a year and end up right back where he started. She didn't have a response. 2 weeks ago, Natalia called me, said Matt had been posting on social media about how his siblings abandoned him, how we turned our backs on family, how we thought we were better than everyone. One of his posts said he was going to show up at Natalia's house and demand to see his nephew. Daniel handled it. He called Matt directly and told him if he stepped foot on their property, he'd be arrested for trespassing. Matt called him a bunch of names and hung up. He never showed. Last weekend, I drove up to see Natalia and the baby. We had dinner, watched a movie, played with James on the living room floor. Daniel's parents came over for brunch on Sunday. My girlfriend and I stayed in their guest room. On the drive home, Natalia texted me a photo of James taking his first steps, holding onto the coffee table, grinning at the camera. Mom and Dad have never seen that kid in person, never held him, never watched him crawl or heard him laugh. They're missing all of it because they couldn't let go of Matt for 5 minutes. My cousin told me last week that Matt's still living at home, still unemployed, still gaming all night in the basement, still waiting for something to magically change without him doing anything different. Meanwhile, I just got promoted at work. Natalia's up for another raise. We're planning a trip together this summer, her and Daniel and James, me and my girlfriend. Renting a cabin somewhere quiet. No drama. No phone calls from parents trying to guilt us. Just family that actually acts like family. Mom texted me yesterday asking if we could talk soon. I left her on red. Some things don't need a response. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks. This story is titled, My Family Excluded Me from the Hawaii Christmas Party at My Sister's Request. So I kicked her and her husband out of my house where they lived rent-free and ignored my parents' phone calls. Now they are begging me. Hey guys, I've been lurking here for a while and figured it's finally my turn to vent. So I, 23 female, have always been the other sibling in my family. My older sister Carly, 28 female, has been the golden child since the day she was born. Seriously, if you could win awards for being a favorite, she'd have a shelf full of them by now. Growing up, everything Carly did was perfect. She could bake a slightly burnt cake, and my parents would call her a culinary genius. Meanwhile, I could ace a test, and all I'd get was, "That's nice, Elena. Did you hear Carly just got promoted to team captain?" To be clear, Carly isn't a terrible person, at least not all the time. She's just Carly. She walks into every room like she owns it, and my parents treat her like she does. She's smart, successful, and married to Brad, who's basically her yes man. The two of them are like the human version of a power couple Instagram account, perfect on the outside, but if you scratch the surface, you'll find a whole lot of entitlement. Anyway, this all started last summer when I came home from college for break. I was already tired from juggling 2 part-time jobs while keeping up with classes. College isn't cheap, and my parents help a little, but not nearly as much as they did with Carly. When she was in school, they covered her dorm, gave her an allowance, and even bought her a car. For me, it's more like, good luck, kiddo. Hope you figure it out. I showed up at the house, hoping for a quiet few weeks. The minute I walked through the door, though, I could feel the Carly effect in full swing. Mom hugged me for what felt like 2 seconds before rushing off to the kitchen, probably to check on whatever special dish she was making. Dad gave me his usual awkward back pat before disappearing into the living room. And then Carly showed up, breezing in like she owned the place, with Brad trailing behind her, carrying their luggage. They were staying for the week, apparently. "Hey, little sis," Carly said, flashing her perfect smile. "Hey, Carly," I said, forcing a smile. Brad gave me a nod. He's not a bad guy, just there. He follows Carly around like a lost puppy, agreeing with everything she says. Dinner that night was classic Carly. Mom pulled out her fancy lace tablecloth, the one she only uses when Carly's around, and made a 3-course meal. I'm not kidding. For Carly, it's steak and roasted veggies. For me, it's, we have leftovers in the fridge, Elena. We were halfway through the meal when Carly decided to make her big announcement. She put her fork down and leaned back, like she was about to deliver a TED Talk. "So," she began, "Brad and I were thinking, Christmas is just around the corner, and we've been working so hard. We deserve a little break. And we thought, what better way to relax than a family trip to Hawaii?" Mom gasped and clapped like a kid. "Oh, Carly, that's such a wonderful idea, isn't it, honey?" Dad nodded. "Fantastic idea, sweetheart." I sat there, chewing on my green beans, waiting for the part where they'd ask my opinion. Then Carly turned to me, her smile sharpening into something less friendly. "Elena, do you think you can afford it? Or should your big sister cover your share?" The room went quiet. Even Brad stopped chewing his steak. My face burned, but I kept my voice steady. "I can manage, thanks." Carly raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? It's going to be around $5,000 per person. Flights, hotels, activities, it all adds up. I just don't want you to feel left out if you can't swing it. I almost choked on my water. $5,000. That was more than all my savings combined. And I was only making minimum wage at my part-time jobs. But I'd rather eat ramen for the next 6 months than accept Carly's charity. I can manage, I repeated. Okay, if you say so, Carly said, shrugging. She turned back to Mom and Dad, completely ignoring me. So, we were thinking of staying at this gorgeous beachfront resort. It's all-inclusive, of course. And there's a spa. Oh, and Brad found this amazing helicopter. We just have to do it. Mom was practically vibrating with excitement. That sounds incredible, Carly. We've never been to Hawaii before. Dad nodded. You two always have such great ideas. Carly smiled like she'd just won an award. Well, you know, Brad and I are used to organizing things. It comes with running a business. Here it was, the part where she had to bring up the restaurant. It's been a lot of work, she continued, but it's paying off. We've got a loyal customer base, amazing reviews, and we just hired another chef last month. That's incredible, Mom gushed. Elena, you should really learn from your sister. She's so driven. You could pick up a few tips from her about setting goals and following through. I bit my tongue so hard it hurt. The rest of the dinner was more of the same. Carly talking about how hard she and Brad work, Mom and Dad hanging on every word, and me sitting there, feeling like an extra in a play about their perfect little family. After dinner, Carly caught me in the hallway. So, she said, crossing her arms, are you really coming? Or is this going to be one of those things where you back out at the last minute because it's too expensive? I'm coming, I said, clenching my fists. She gave me that smirk again. Good. I'd hate for you to miss out. Just don't embarrass yourself, okay? I mean, it's Hawaii. You don't want to be stuck eating sandwiches while the rest of us are enjoying the nice stuff. I didn't respond. I just nodded and walked away, already planning how I was going to prove her wrong. And that was the last thing Carly said to me that night, and I spent the rest of the evening in my room, pretending to study, but mostly just stewing. My sister's entire personality was built on one-upping me, and somehow no one ever called her out on it. Every word out of her mouth was either a brag or a backhanded comment. I was determined to save up for this Hawaii trip, not just to prove her wrong, but because I was sick of being treated like the poor kid who didn't belong. But that dinner left me feeling like I was 10 again. Nothing had changed. The same eager nods from Mom, the same proud smile on Dad's face, the same feeling of being invisible. Carly was still their golden child, just as she'd been since we were kids. 5 years between us might as well have been 50. For all the difference it made in how our parents saw us, they never said it outright, but their actions spoke volumes. Carly was the one they believed. Thank God for Grandpa Thomas. He was the only person in my family who ever made me feel like I mattered. While Carly had Mom and Dad wrapped around her finger, Grandpa treated me like I was just as important as her, maybe even more sometimes. He'd always pull me aside at family gatherings, slip me a $20 and whisper, "Don't let your sister steal all the attention, kiddo. You're special too." Let me tell you more about him. Grandpa was successful in his own right, a businessman who worked his way up from nothing. He had this big old house on Maple Street with a wraparound porch and a backyard that felt like it went on forever. It was my favorite place in the world. When I was a kid, he'd let me sit on the porch swing and listen to his stories about how he built his business or how he met Grandma. Carly liked to say the house was dated and needed a serious makeover, but to me, it was perfect. Sure, the paint was peeling in a few spots and the floors creaked, but it felt like home in a way my parents' house never did. When Grandpa passed away during my freshman year of college, it hit me hard. I was sitting in my dorm room when Mom called, her voice shaking as she said the words, "Grandpa's gone." I couldn't even respond. It felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. The funeral was quiet and small, just the way he would have wanted. It was held on a cloudy day, the kind where it looks like the sky might break open at any second. Carly showed up in a sleek black dress that probably cost more than my laptop, clinging to Brad. Mom and Dad hovered around her, making sure she had everything she needed. Meanwhile, I sat near the back, feeling out of place even at my own grandpa's funeral. After the service, we all went to the attorney's office for the reading of the will. I wasn't expecting much. Grandpa wasn't the type to flaunt his wealth, and I figured whatever he had would go to Mom and Dad. But when the attorney started reading, I realized just how much Grandpa had thought about everything. "To my daughter Linda," the attorney began, "I leave the sum of $25,000. Mom nodded, dabbing her eyes with a tissue like she'd expected as much. "To my granddaughter Carly," the attorney continued, "I leave the sum of $150,000. Carly's eyes lit up. She turned to Brad and whispered something I couldn't hear, but it didn't take a genius to figure out she was already planning how to spend it. Then the attorney looked at me. "And to my granddaughter, Elena," he said, "I leave my house on Maple Street, including all its contents and surrounding property. The room went silent. Carly was the first to break it. Wait, what? Elena gets the old house? She actually laughed out loud, like it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. Wow. Okay, sure. Enjoy that, Elena. Maybe you can sell it and buy yourself something decent to wear. Mom shushed her, but she didn't really sound upset. Carly, don't be rude, she said, even though she was smiling. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I was too stunned. I wasn't sure how to feel about it. On one hand, I loved that house. It was the one place that had always felt safe, and knowing Grandpa had left it to me made me feel like he still believed in me, even after he was gone. But on the other hand, I was a broke college student. Houses aren't cheap to maintain, and I knew the property taxes alone would be a nightmare. Still, I thanked the attorney, took the keys, and promised myself I'd figure it out. Grandpa trusted me with this, and I wasn't going to let him down. Over the next few months, I started visiting the house whenever I could. It wasn't in the best shape. Some of the pipes needed fixing, and the roof had a small leak, but it still felt like Grandpa was there. His fishing rods were still propped up in the corner of the living room, and his favorite leather chair was exactly where he'd left it. Of course, Carly couldn't leave it alone. Every time she came over, she'd make some snide comment about how outdated the place was. You should just sell it, she said one afternoon, sitting on the couch like she owned it. I mean, what are you even going to do with a house like this? You can't afford to fix it up, and honestly, it's kind of a dump. I bit my tongue, like I always did around her. Then suddenly Carly wanted to stay at the house, the same one she kept mocking. The moment she said, "So, Brad and I were thinking we could stay at the house for a bit while we sort some things out with the restaurant," my stomach sank. I knew that tone. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, disguised as one. "I don't know," I started, trying to sound neutral. "It's just until things settle down," Carly added quickly, flashing her perfect smile. "The restaurant's been crazy, and we just need a breather." Brad, standing behind her, nodded like a backup dancer. "Yeah, it's only temporary. A couple of months, max." Before I could respond, my mom chimed in from the kitchen. "Oh, Elena, don't be selfish. They've got so much on their plate. Your family. You should want to help." I felt cornered. On one hand, I didn't want them there. Sharing space with Carly is like being stuck in a competition you never signed up for. On the other hand, saying no would paint me as the villain of the family. My mom's guilt-tripping tone sealed the deal. "Fine," I said, forcing a smile. "You can stay." At first, it wasn't terrible. They mostly kept to themselves, and I figured they'd be out in a month or two. But weeks turned into months, and soon it was like they'd taken over the entire house. Brad filled the garage with his tools, even though he barely used them. Carly replaced Grandpa's old armchair with some overpriced monstrosity she called modern chic, and started reorganizing the kitchen like it was her personal domain. The worst part? They weren't paying a single dime in rent. Not a penny. When I tried to bring it up with my parents, they just brushed me off. "Family helps family, Elena," my mom said, like that was supposed to erase the frustration brewing inside me. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that they'd be out soon. But deep down, I knew better. Carly always got what she wanted, and no one ever told her no. Not even me. While I studied for midterms in my cramped dorm room, my sister and her husband lived rent-free in my house every time I came home for breaks. I had to ask permission to visit what was legally my own property. Let's get back to the present. Now fast forward a bit, and after that summer dinner, I started working myself to the bone to save up for the Hawaii trip Carly had so graciously included me in. Between my campus cafe job in the mornings and library shifts at night, I barely had time to breathe, let alone enjoy what little life I had. My diet consisted mostly of instant noodles and cheap granola bars, and I hadn't bought anything new in months, but I didn't care. I was determined to go on that trip, if only to prove to Carly that I wasn't the failure she seemed to think I was. By late November, I'd finally saved up enough. It wasn't easy, but seeing that $5,000 in my bank account felt like a victory. Carly called me one evening, her tone brisk, like she was doing me a favor by even picking up the phone. "We need to finalize the bookings," she said. "Have you got your share ready?" "Yeah," I said, already opening my banking app. "Good. Transfer it to me tonight." I don't want to risk prices going up. I sent her the money immediately, my hands shaking slightly as I clicked confirm. Watching my account drop back down to double digits was nerve-wracking, but it was worth it. I was finally going to Hawaii to treat myself. December 23rd rolled around, and the house was buzzing with excitement. Well, Carly and Mom were buzzing. I was mostly just trying to keep up. Carly kept talking about all the activities she had planned. The dinner cruises, the snorkeling trips, the spa days. She even picked out matching outfits for the family photos we'd apparently be taking. The night before we were supposed to leave, I packed my suitcase with a mix of excitement and relief. After everything I'd been through, I finally felt like I'd earned this trip. But the next morning, things started to feel off. Mom and Dad were unusually quiet, avoiding eye contact whenever I walked into the room. Carly and Brad were acting normal, but in that overly casual way people do when they're hiding something. I tried to shake it off, chalking it up to pre-trip jitters. At breakfast, Carly cleared her throat, and the room went silent. "So, before we head out, we need to talk," she said, her tone serious but with a hint of fake sympathy. I set my fork down, already feeling uneasy. "Okay, about what?" Carly glanced at Brad, who nodded like they'd rehearsed this. "The restaurant. Well, we've hit a rough patch. Brad and I have been running the numbers. They aren't what we projected, and the trip is costing a little more than we expected. We had to make some adjustments to the budget." I was so confused, and the whole vibe shifted. "What kind of adjustments?" I asked. "Well," Carly said, drawing the word out like she was trying to soften the blow, "we've decided it's best if you don't come with us. Your contribution is helping cover the rest of our costs." I stared at her, waiting for her to laugh. But she wasn't joking. "What?" I finally managed to say. Carly sighed, like this was hard for her. "It's nothing personal, Elena. It's just that Brad and I never had a proper honeymoon, and this trip is really important for us. You understand, right?" "Wait," I said, my voice shaking. "I already paid my share. I worked double shifts for months to save up for this." Mom jumped in, her tone overly patient, like she was explaining something to a child. "Elena, you have to understand. Carly and Brad are under a lot of stress with the restaurant. This trip is a chance for them to recharge. Family helps family." "But I'm family too," I said, my voice rising. "I paid for this trip just like everyone else. How is it fair that I get left behind?" Dad avoided my gaze, staring down at his coffee mug like it held all the answers. Carly, meanwhile, just shrugged. "Life isn't always fair, Elaine. Besides, someone needs to stay back and watch the house." That was it. That was their big justification for stealing my money and kicking me off the trip. I was so angry I could barely see straight, but I knew there was no point arguing. Mom and Dad were firmly on Carly's side, as always. I lashed out to my room. I spent the rest of the day there, listening to the sound of suitcases being zipped and last-minute plans being made. No one came to check on me, not even Mom. By the time evening rolled around, I'd made my decision. The next morning, I woke up early and joined them on the porch as they loaded their luggage into the taxi. Carly was in high spirits, chatting about the resort's amenities and all the Instagram-worthy moments she had planned. Brad was his usual silent self, nodding along as he loaded the bags. "Don't forget to water the plants," Mom said as she climbed into the taxi, "and check the mail every day." Carly leaned out the window, flashing me a smile that was anything but friendly. "We'll send you pictures so you don't feel too left out." She laughed and walked past me. I waved and smiled, playing my part perfectly. "Have a great trip," I called out as the taxi pulled away. As soon as they turned the corner, I dropped the act. I definitely wasn't going to let them get away with it, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do. As soon as their taxis disappeared around the corner, I went inside, grabbed my keys, and drove straight to Grandpa's house, my house. I had spent the past year biting my tongue, staying quiet while Carly and Brad treated my inheritance like their personal kingdom. But after what they'd pulled with the Hawaii trip, I was done playing nice. Walking through the front door felt surreal. The place didn't even look like Grandpa's house anymore. Carly had replaced almost everything, from the furniture to the curtains. The warm, cozy space I grew up loving had been transformed into something cold and impersonal. Even the walls felt wrong, painted in dull grays and whites instead of the soft greens and yellows Grandpa had always preferred. I stood there for a moment, taking it all in, and then I got to work. The first thing I did was grab every box and suitcase I could find. Carly and Brad had left plenty behind, probably because they assumed no one would dare touch their stuff. I went room by room, methodically packing up their designer clothes, their overpriced decor, and even the little knickknacks Carly had scattered around to make the house hers. Grandpa's old study was the hardest to deal with. It used to be my favorite room in the house, with its cozy leather chair and shelves full of books. Now it was filled with Brad's junk, random tools, stacks of paperwork, and a collection of ugly modern art pieces that didn't match anything else in the house. I found their important documents in a filing cabinet and packed those too. I wasn't about to throw away anything they might actually need, but I wasn't leaving it here either. If they wanted their stuff back, they could come and get it from storage. By the time I finished packing, the living room was filled with boxes and suitcases. It was almost satisfying, seeing all their things stacked up like that. Like I was finally taking control of something they'd stolen from me. Then I called a moving company. I explained the situation. Yes, it was last minute. And yes, it was Christmas Eve, but I needed everything out of the house as soon as possible. They quoted me triple the usual rate, and I didn't even flinch. "Just get it done," I told them. While I waited for the movers to arrive, I walked through the house one more time. With all of Carly and Brad's stuff packed up, it felt a little more like Grandpa's place again. His fishing rods were still in the corner of the garage. untouched. The old kitchen table, the one with the wobbly leg, was still there too. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The movers showed up a few hours later. I directed them to the boxes in the living room, and they started loading everything into the truck. They worked quickly, probably because they wanted to get home to their families, and within an hour, the house was empty of Carly and Brad's presence. After they left, I made one more call to a 24-hour locksmith. I wasn't taking any chances. Carly and Brad still had keys to the house, and I didn't trust them not to barge back in whenever they felt like it. The locksmith arrived just before sunset, and by the time he finished, every lock in the house had been changed. "Anything else you need?" he asked, packing up his tools. "No, that's it," I said, handing him a tip. "Thanks for coming out on such short notice." He nodded and left, and I stood there in the doorway, staring out at the quiet street. For the first time in what felt like forever, the house was mine again. That night, I made myself a simple dinner and sat at the old kitchen table. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt right. I could almost hear Grandpa's voice in the back of my mind, telling me stories about his childhood or offering advice on life. "You did good, kiddo," I imagined him. After dinner, I wandered into the living room and sat in the one piece of furniture I'd refused to let Carly replace, Grandpa's leather chair. It was old and worn, with cracks in the material and a slightly lopsided cushion, but it was still the most comfortable seat in the house. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through Instagram. As expected, Carly had already started posting photos from Hawaii. There she was, lounging by the pool with Brad, both of them grinning like they didn't leave me alone here. "Living our best lives," the caption read. I rolled my eyes and put my phone away. I wasn't going to let her ruin this moment. Instead, I focused on making a plan. I wasn't just going to pack up their stuff and change the locks. I was going to take back control of my life. I started drafting an email to a property management company I'd looked into a while back. If Carly and Brad couldn't respect the fact that this was my house, then I'd find tenants who could. By the time I finished, it was late and I was exhausted. But for the first time in months, I felt like I could actually sleep. I went upstairs to my old room, the one place Carly hadn't bothered to touch, and collapsed onto the bed. The glow-in-the-dark stars Grandpa and I had stuck to the ceiling years ago were still there, faint but comforting. As I drifted off, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. For once, I wasn't letting Carly walk all over me. This was my house, my inheritance, and my life, and I was finally taking it back. I couldn't wait to see their reaction when they came back, and I was ready for whatever they decided to throw my way, because this time, I'd had enough. And as expected, the day after Christmas, my phone started buzzing nonstop. At first, it was just a couple of texts from Mom, asking me to call her. Then, there was one from Dad, which is rare because he usually lets Mom handle everything. Finally, Carly chimed in with a string of messages that went from annoyed to outright furious. I ignored them all, but when the calls started coming in, rapid fire, Mom, Carly, Mom again, then Dad, I knew I couldn't avoid it much longer. I sighed, put my coffee down, and answered the next call. "What the hell is going on?" Carly's voice exploded through the speaker before I could even say hello. "Why are all of our things in storage? And why don't our keys work?" I held the phone away from my ear, letting her rant for a solid minute before cutting in. "Because it's my house," I said even, "and you've overstayed your welcome." "Your house?" Carly scoffed. "Are you serious right now? Do you have any idea how inconvenient this is? Brad and I have been planning this trip for months, and now we come back to this? Inconvenient?" I said, my voice rising despite myself. "You want to talk about inconveniences? Let's talk about how you stole my money, excluded me from the trip I paid for, and left me here to babysit a house you treated like garbage. How's that for inconvenience?" There was a pause, just long enough for me to think I'd actually gotten through to her. Then Carly laughed, a short, sharp sound that made my blood boil. "You're being so dramatic," she said. "It's not like you were actually going to enjoy the trip anyway. You've never been the adventurous type, Elena. We were doing you a favor." "A favor?" I repeated, barely able to keep my voice steady. "Yeah," Carly said, like it was obvious. "And now you're acting like a spoiled brat because we used the money for something important. Family helps family, remember? Funny how that only seems to apply when it benefits you," I shot back. "But sure, Carly, keep telling yourself that you're the victim here." Before she could respond, I hung up. Then my mom called. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but I knew she wouldn't stop until I answered. "Elena," she said, her voice sharp and accusatory. "What were you thinking? Throwing Carly and Brad out like that? They're family." "Are they?" I asked, unable to hide the bitterness in my tone. "Because they sure didn't act like family when they stole my money, the one I worked hard to earn, and left me behind." "Don't be ridiculous," Mom said. "They didn't steal anything. They needed help, and you were in a position to provide it. You should be proud of that." "Proud," I repeated, laughing without humor. You want me to be proud of being treated like a doormat? Mom sighed, the way she always did when she thought I was being unreasonable. Elena, you're blowing this way out of proportion. Carly and Brad are going through a tough time, and you're making it worse by kicking them out of the house. Where are they supposed to go? I don't care. It's not my problem, I said flatly. But it's not my problem anymore. Of course it's your problem, Mom snapped. You're being selfish, Elena. I didn't raise you to be like this. Selfish? I said, my voice rising again. You want to talk about selfish? How about the fact that Carly and Brad lived in my house rent-free for months, trashed the place, and then turned around and stole $5,000 from me? Or how about the fact that you and Dad let it happen and didn't say a word? If anyone here is selfish, it's obviously you. Shut up, Mom said, her tone icy. I'm not going to argue with you anymore. Fix this, Elena. Now. Before I could respond, she hung up. For the rest of the day, my phone kept buzzing with messages and calls. Mom, Dad, Carly, even Brad chimed in with a passive-aggressive text about family loyalty. I ignored them all. By the time evening rolled around, I was exhausted, not physically, but emotionally. I sat on the couch, staring at my phone as it buzzed for what felt like the 100th time that day. Finally, I picked it up and sent a single message to the family group chat. I'm not fixing anything. The house is mine and I've made my decision. If you want to talk about loyalty, maybe start by looking in the mirror. Then, I put my phone on silent, set it on the table, and walked away. I felt the satisfaction of standing for myself and defending what's actually mine. After a week, my phone, which had been buzzing nonstop for hours, now sat still on the coffee table. No more calls, no more messages. It was almost eerie, but also freeing. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't letting my family's drama dictate my life. They could call me selfish or ungrateful all they wanted, but I knew the truth. I wasn't the villain in this story. The next morning, I got an email from the property management company I'd contacted a few days earlier. They'd reviewed the house and had already started lining up potential tenants. Seeing their response felt like a small victory. Carly and Brad may have treated my inheritance like a free vacation home, but I wasn't going to let them ruin it forever. By the time New Year's rolled around, the house was officially listed as available for rent. The company assured me they'd handle everything. Background checks, maintenance requests, even collecting rent. All I had to do was sit back and let them do their job. Meanwhile, Carly and Brad had officially moved back in with my parents. I heard about it through the family grapevine, mostly from my cousin Jessica, who's never been great at keeping secrets. They're staying in your old room, Jessica said during one of our weekly calls. Carly's already complaining about the lack of closet space, and Brad keeps hogging the TV in the living room. Your mom's losing her mind. I couldn't help but laugh. It was petty, sure, but after everything Carly and Brad had put me through, the thought of them cramped into my childhood bedroom felt like poetic justice. As the weeks passed, the messages from my family grew less frequent. Mom still called occasionally, but her tone had shifted. She wasn't angry anymore, just tired. Elena, she said during one of our last conversations, don't you think it's time to let this go? Carly and Brad are struggling. They need support right now, and you've turned your back on them. They're not struggling, Mom, I replied. They're just facing the consequences of their actions for once. There's a difference, Mom sighed. I just wish you could see things from their perspective. I did, I said, for years, and all it got me was an empty bank account and a house full of their junk. I'm done bending over backward to make everyone else happy. It's time I start thinking about myself for a change. Mom didn't have much to say after that. By mid-February, the house was officially rented out to a young couple with a baby on the way. They loved the place, especially the backyard, and promised to take good care of it. Knowing the house was in good hands was a huge relief. With the rent covering the property taxes and then some, I finally had some breathing room financially. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was drowning. I even managed to save up enough to treat myself to a weekend getaway with some friends. Nothing fancy, just a cabin in the mountains, but it was exactly what I needed. Meanwhile, Carly and Brad's situation wasn't going quite as smoothly. Jessica kept me updated, whether I wanted her to or not. They're driving your parents insane, she said during one call. Carly's always complaining about how unfair you were, and Brad just sits there agreeing with her. I think your dad's about to snap. Good, I said, laughing. Maybe they'll finally get a taste of what it's like to deal with her full time. By the time spring rolled around, Carly had stopped trying to contact me entirely. I'd blocked her on Instagram after one too many passive-aggressive posts about loyalty and family values, and her calls had dwindled to nothing. Mom still called occasionally, but even those conversations were getting shorter. The funny thing is, I thought I'd feel guilty about it all. Cutting ties with my family, standing up to Carly, taking back my house, I thought it would weigh on me, make me second-guess myself. But it didn't. If anything, I felt lighter. One night, as I sat on the porch swing of my rented house, sipping a cup of tea, I found myself thinking about Grandpa. I wondered what he would have said if he could see me now. I'm proud of you, kiddo, I imagined him saying. just like he used to when I was a kid. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had done something right, something for me, not to please anyone else or live up to someone else's expectation. It might not seem like a big deal to you guys, but for me, it felt like finally taking a breath after being underwater for years. Tell me in the comments if you ever had one of those moments where you realize you're done being walked over, because that's exactly what this felt like. Thanks for sticking until the end. At my wedding, my parents gave a speech about their successful children and didn't mention me once. The DJ then announced I'd been covering their debt for 5 years. Mom fainted. Dad's face went purple. 3 months ago, my wedding turned into a masterclass in family dysfunction, and I'm still picking shrapnel out of my soul. I'm Patrick, 32, and I just married the most incredible woman alive. But this story isn't about love. It's about how my parents weaponized what should have been my perfect day to remind me I'm their personal bank account. Meet the cast. My parents, Richard and Carol, are suburban peacocks who think success means impressing the neighbors. Dad sells insurance, but acts like he runs Goldman Sachs from his strip mall office. Mom moves maybe 3 houses a year, but considers herself the next real estate mogul. They live in a Pinterest fever dream of granite countertops they couldn't afford, matching Honda Pilots replaced like clockwork, and a lawn Dad treats like sacred ground. Then there's Golden Boy Jake, 29, marketing guru at some startup nobody's heard of, driving a leased BMW that costs more than my mortgage, living his best Instagram life in a downtown loft. Every family dinner is the Jake show. Did you see Jake's promotion? Jake's girlfriend is so lovely. Jake's revolutionizing digital landscapes. Princess Emma, 26, just graduated from an overpriced private college with a communications degree, which apparently qualifies her to find herself while living rent-free at home. She works part-time at a boutique selling $200 candles, calling it her career exploration phase. Everything Emma touches turns to artistic gold, even when she's literally folding aromatherapy products. And me? I'm the invisible middle child who somehow became everyone's financial lifeline. I work logistics for a regional shipping company. Not glamorous, but I coordinate the stuff that keeps the world moving. I make $95,000, keeping goods flowing from A to B, live in a modest house with a 7-year-old F-150, and apparently, that makes me the family's designated ATM. Growing up, love was transactional. Love was. Jake got attention for charm, Emma for sensitivity, and me? I got noticed when I was useful. The low-maintenance kid they could safely ignore until they needed something. High school was a masterpiece of neglect. Jake, star quarterback. Emma, theater darling. Me, honor roll student whose games nobody attended. I learned early that steady doesn't get applause, but it sure gets exploitation. College saved me. Studying supply chain management while working part-time jobs Jake and Emma never needed. I graduated with honors and landed a job 3 weeks later, while Jake partied through business school on mom and dad's dime, and Emma collected participation trophies. But 5 years ago, right around Jake's senior year, everything changed. That's when my parents' house of financial cards started tumbling, though it took months to realize just how spectacularly they'd screwed themselves. And somehow, guess who became responsible for cleaning up their mess? The wedding was supposed to be my day. Instead, it became the moment I finally understood I wasn't their son. I was their exit strategy. It started with Dad's midlife crisis investment phase. He'd always been a sucker for get-rich-quick schemes. But this was different. He started hanging around with guys from his insurance office, all convinced they'd strike it rich in cryptocurrency and house flipping. First came Bitcoin when it was riding high. $15,000 they didn't have, convinced it would make them millionaires. Then, a buddy's house flipping venture guaranteed to double their money in 6 months. Another $20,000 vanished. When those predictably went south, instead of cutting losses, they doubled down. More crypto, sketchy business loans, even some MLM thing that promised to make mom a boss babe entrepreneur. By the time they admitted there was a problem, they were $47,000 in credit card debt across 6 different cards with interest rates that would make loan sharks blush. The call came on a Tuesday night in October. Mom's name on caller ID, unusual since she typically texted unless someone was dying. Patrick, sweetie, are you busy? Her voice had that fake bright quality she used when hiding something. 20 minutes later, I was at their expensive dining room table, bought on credit, naturally, staring at the carnage. Bank statements, credit card bills, loan documents spread out like war plans. Dad was clearing his throat nervously while Mom fidgeted with her wedding ring. They looked like kids caught shoplifting. We're in a bit of a financial bind, Dad said, his insurance salesman voice cracking. A bit of a bind. Right. They spent an hour explaining their investments, how they'd tried digging out by taking cash advances, only making things worse, how bankruptcy would destroy their credit forever. "We don't want to burden you kids," Mom said, voice cracking, "but we need to act fast." Here's the thing. They didn't call a family meeting, didn't ask Jake or Emma for help, just me. Because I was the only one with savings, good credit, and the stability to bail them out. Jake was maxing his own cards, maintaining his lifestyle. Emma was still in college on their dime. But me? I was responsible. They knew I'd fix it, because that's what I always did. "How much?" I asked, dreading the answer. "50,000 would cover everything," Dad said. I should have said no. Should have told them to file bankruptcy and face consequences. Instead, I did what I always did. I fixed their problem. That weekend, I took out a $50,000 personal loan. They cried when I transferred the money, calling me their hero son. That feeling lasted until their next financial emergency. 6 months later, roof repairs. Insurance won't cover it all. Another $8,000. Dad's car transmission. "I need it for work, son." Another $4,500. Emma's senior year. Student loan fell through. Another $15,000. Jake's engagement party. First impressions matter. Another $7,000. Jake's wedding. We want him to have the perfect day. Another $12,000. Every single time it was temporary. Every time they'd pay me back once they sorted their finances. Every time I transferred money, because that's what family does. I kept a spreadsheet. Call me obsessive. The original $50,000, plus all subsequent emergencies, plus interest I was paying on loans to cover their expenses. Total loaned over 5 years. $127,000. Amount they'd paid back. 0. Not a single payment. Not even $50 to show good faith. But it gets better. Every month, I'd get chatty calls from Mom updating me on their lives. New furniture, Florida vacations, Dad's golf clubs, Emma's Europe trip, Jake's expensive condo housewarming. They were living better than ever, while I made payments on loans that funded their lifestyle. At family gatherings, I got to hear them brag about Jake's marketing success and Emma's bright communications future. When people asked what I did, Dad would wave dismissively. "Patrick works in shipping. Very reliable job. Like I was a postal worker." Jake's campaigns fascinated everyone. Emma's job search brought suggestions and connections. When I mentioned my work, conversation moved on within minutes. I was the family's financial backbone, but might as well have been invisible. They'd reframed our relationship completely. I wasn't the son who'd saved them from bankruptcy. I was just Patrick, the responsible one doing fine on his own. The money wasn't a sacrifice. It was just what I did, because I was stable. They'd convinced themselves I owed them this support. After all, they'd raised me, fed me, put me through college, with my scholarship and jobs, but who's counting? Except they'd given me nothing but the opportunity to pay for their mistakes. Enter Sarah, whom I met at a logistics conference 3 years ago. She was making sarcastic comments under her breath during a boring warehouse optimization presentation, and I knew I wanted to get to know her better. She's brilliant, one of the youngest supply chain directors at her company, and funny in that sharp, no-bullshit way that cuts through pretense like a knife. Zero tolerance for manipulation or dishonesty. When I told her about my family's financial situation around month 3, her reaction was immediate. "Wait, let me get this straight," she said, setting down her coffee. "You've loaned them over $100,000. They've never paid back a penny, and they don't even acknowledge what you've done?" "It's complicated," I said, my default response. "No, it's not complicated. You're their son, not their bank." Sarah grew up working class where everyone contributed according to their means, and help was acknowledged, appreciated, and reciprocated. The idea of parents systematically exploiting their child's generosity while treating him like an afterthought was foreign to her. "This isn't normal, Patrick. Healthy families don't work this way." When we got engaged after 2 years, Sarah wanted a simple wedding. "I don't need a big production. I just want to marry you and have people we love witness it." My parents had other ideas. I mentioned our venue choice. A nice community center with a beautiful garden for 75 people. Reasonable rental, perfect space, manageable costs. Mom's reaction was horrified. "You can't have your reception at a community center, Patrick. What will people think? This is our son's wedding." Suddenly it was their son's wedding. They pushed for bigger venues, better caterers, open bars, upgraded everything. "We'll help pay for it," Dad promised. "We want this to be special." I should have known better, but I tried keeping peace. We compromised on a historic inn with a beautiful ballroom, elegant without being ostentatious. Final budget, $28,000, more than initially planned but reasonable. 2 weeks before the wedding, guess who came knocking? Patrick, we need to talk, Dad said apologetically. Dad's commission check didn't come through, Mom explained when I went over. The sale fell through, and now we're in a tight spot. Their favorite phrase for explaining unmet obligations. We can't contribute as much as we wanted to. As much as they wanted to. They hadn't contributed anything yet. Everything required advance payment. How much can you actually cover? Well, we can probably manage about $2,000, Mom said. Maybe $3,000 if we stretch and put it on the credit card. $3,000. For a wedding, they'd insisted on upgrading from $12,000 to $28,000. Sarah was in the kitchen loading the dishwasher with enough force to suggest she was imagining my parents' heads. When they left, she gave me that look. Let me guess. They want you to cover the difference. Of course they did. And like an idiot, I agreed, transferring money to cover almost the entire wedding cost. This is the last time, I told Sarah. After the wedding, I'm done being their financial backup plan. She just looked at me with knowing eyes that said she'd heard that promise before. The rehearsal dinner should have been perfect, both families celebrating together. Instead, it was a preview of coming humiliation. My parents held court, schmoozing with Sarah's family. Dad told his favorite insurance sales stories, while Mom complimented everyone in sight. Patrick has always been so good with money, Dad told Sarah's construction company owner father, gesturing with his wine glass. Very responsible, very practical. Not like his siblings. They're more the creative types. I nearly choked. Responsible with money. The guy bankrolling their lifestyle was responsible, while they were creative types too special for financial stability. Jake spent the evening making his marketing project sound revolutionary. Emma entertained everyone with job search stories about holding out for the perfect opportunity. When Sarah's dad asked about my logistics work, the conversation lasted 3 minutes before Dad steered back to Jake's achievements or Emma's bright future. That night in our hotel room, Sarah was unusually quiet. You okay? I'm thinking about what your dad said at dinner. He called you responsible with money while sitting at a table you paid for, talking about a wedding you're funding, wearing a suit you bought him. She turned to face me in the dark. Do you realize they've never once acknowledged what you've done for them? I did realize it. I just hadn't let myself think about it because it hurt too much. The wedding day itself started perfectly. The weather cooperated. Clear skies, mild temperature, gentle breeze. The venue looked incredible with the flowers we'd chosen. The garden was in full bloom, and everything was falling into place exactly as planned. Sarah looked absolutely radiant in her dress. We'd found it at a sample sale 6 months earlier. Nothing extravagant, just a simple, elegant design that made her look like something out of a fairy tale. When I saw her walking down the aisle with her father, everything else faded away. All the family drama, all the financial stress, all the years of feeling invisible, none of it mattered in that moment. The ceremony was perfect. We'd written our own vows, and when Sarah promised to always see me, always value me, always stand by me, I felt like maybe I'd found the family I'd been looking for all along. We kissed, everyone cheered, and we headed to the reception feeling like nothing could touch us. The inn's ballroom had been transformed into something magical. White lights strung from the ceiling, candles on every table, and flowers everywhere. The upgraded arrangements Mom had insisted on naturally. The DJ, Mike, was professional and charming, keeping the energy up while staying out of the way. Everything was going exactly as planned. Dinner was excellent. We'd chosen a local caterer known for their quality, and the food was worth every penny of the premium we'd paid. The cake was beautiful, the bar was well stocked, and our guests seemed to be having a wonderful time. Then came time for the speeches. Sarah's father went first, as tradition dictates. Tom stood up with his whiskey in hand and delivered the kind of toast that every father of the bride should give. He talked about watching Sarah grow up, about her strength and intelligence, about how proud he was of the woman she'd become. He welcomed me into their family with genuine warmth, telling everyone that he couldn't have asked for a better son-in-law. Sarah's always been able to see through bullshit, he said, which got a laugh from everyone who knew her. So when she told me she'd found someone special, I knew he had to be the real deal. Patrick, welcome to the family. We're lucky to have you. There wasn't a dry eye in the house. It was exactly the kind of speech I'd always imagined a father giving at his child's wedding. Proud, loving, genuine. Then it was my father's turn. Dad stood up, straightened his tie, the one from the expensive suit I'd bought him for the occasion, and tapped his champagne glass with a knife. The room quieted down, and he waited for everyone's attention with the practiced timing of someone who'd given plenty of presentations in his career. He looked around the room, smiling at familiar faces, clearly enjoying being the center of attention. Carol and I are so proud to be here today, celebrating this wonderful occasion, he began, his voice carrying that smooth, professional tone he used for client presentations. When you raise children, you hope and pray they'll grow up to be successful, productive members of society. So far, so good. Standard father of the groom material. Well, I can tell you that Carol and I have been truly blessed in that regard. We have raised children who have exceeded our every expectation. My stomach started to drop. I knew that tone. I knew where this was going. Our son Jake has built an impressive career in digital marketing, working with major brands and developing strategies that have generated millions in revenue for his company. Just last year, he gave us the beautiful wedding that brought his lovely wife Amanda into our family. The room was listening politely, waiting for him to get to the part about me. You know, the groom. The person whose wedding this was supposed to be. And our daughter Emma, well, she's just at the beginning of what I know will be an incredible journey. She's got a degree in communications from one of the finest private colleges in the state, and she's already making waves in the creative industry. The sky's the limit for that girl. He paused, looking around the room with obvious pride, soaking up the attention. Carol and I couldn't be prouder of our successful children. They've made us the luckiest parents in the world. And then he raised his glass with a flourish. To Patrick and Sarah! That was it. That was the entire speech. He'd talked about Jake's career success, Emma's bright future, their successful children plural, without mentioning a single thing about me except my name at the very end, like an afterthought. The room was confused. I could see people looking around, murmuring to each other, wondering if he was finished. Sarah's hand found mine under the table and squeezed so hard it almost hurt. Her face was flushed with anger and embarrassment, not for herself, but for me. Then my mother stood up to add her contribution. We're just so happy that Patrick found someone willing to take care of him, she said with a laugh that sounded forced even to my ears. We always worried he'd end up alone since he's so focused on work all the time. But Sarah seems like such a practical, sensible girl. Perfect for someone like Patrick, someone willing to take care of me. Like I was some kind of charity case who'd been lucky to find anyone at all. The applause that followed was polite but confused. People weren't sure what they'd just witnessed, but they could sense something was off. Sarah's family looked uncomfortable. My co-workers were exchanging glances. Even some of my extended family members seemed puzzled by the lukewarm, backhanded nature of my parents' toast. Quick pause, fellas. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way. Thanks so much for your support. All right, back to the drama. I sat there, trying to keep my expression neutral, while inside I was burning. $127,000. 5 years of bailing them out of every crisis. A wedding I'd paid for almost entirely myself, including the clothes they were wearing and the food they were eating. And this was how they saw me, as the boring, workaholic son who'd gotten lucky in love. Mike, the DJ, seemed to sense something was wrong. He was a consummate professional, the kind of guy who'd probably seen every variety of family dysfunction at wedding receptions, and he could read a room better than most therapists. He approached our table during the confused applause that followed my mother's speech. Everything okay over here? He asked quietly, leaning down so only Sarah and I could hear him. Would you like to say something? Share some words about your family? That's when Sarah looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not angry, not sad, but something else entirely. Determined, protective, done. Actually, she said, loud enough for Mike to hear clearly, there's something important the guests should know about Patrick, about what kind of man they're celebrating tonight. Mike nodded and handed her the microphone without hesitation. Sarah stood up slowly, and the room quieted down again. She looked beautiful and fierce, like an avenging angel in white silk. I had no idea what she was about to do, but I could see in her eyes that whatever it was, there would be no going back from it. Thank you all for being here tonight, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system. Before we continue with the celebration, I think there are some things you should know about the man I just married, things that apparently got left out of the previous speeches. She turned to look at me, and I saw nothing but love and fierce protection in her eyes. Then she turned back to the crowd. 5 years ago, when Patrick's parents faced serious financial difficulties, $47,000 in credit card debt, Patrick took out a personal loan for $50,000 to pay off their debt completely. He didn't hesitate. He didn't ask for collateral or a payment plan. He just helped his family because that's who he is. I felt the blood drain from my face. She wasn't supposed to know the exact numbers. I'd been vague about the amounts, but apparently Sarah had been paying closer attention than I realized. Over the past 5 years, Sarah continued, her voice getting stronger. Patrick has given his parents a total of $127,000. He's paid for roof repairs, car repairs, college tuition, engagement parties, and even helped fund Jake's wedding last year. The room was absolutely silent now. You could have heard a pin drop. My parents looked like deer caught in headlights, their champagne glasses frozen halfway to their lips. And in all that time, 5 full years, his parents haven't paid back a single dollar. Not one payment, not even a token amount to show good faith. Mom's champagne glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor, the sound impossibly loud in the silent room. Patrick paid for this wedding almost entirely by himself, including the venue his parents insisted on upgrading, the flowers they said were necessary, and even the suits and dress they're wearing tonight. Dad's face was turning that familiar shade of purple I remembered from my childhood, the color he turned when something happened that he couldn't control or manipulate his way out of. So when I hear speeches about successful children, Sarah said, her voice carrying just a hint of steel now, I want everyone to know that the most successful person at this table, the most generous, the most loyal, the most selfless, is the man sitting right here. The one who works hard, saves his money, and takes care of his family without expecting recognition, appreciation, or even basic acknowledgement. She handed the microphone back to Mike and sat down. The applause that followed wasn't polite wedding applause. It was thunderous. People were standing now, cheering, raising their glasses. Sarah's family was clapping and shouting approval. My co-workers were nodding with respect and understanding. Even some of my extended family members looked impressed and perhaps a little ashamed. But my parents? Dad looked like he was about to have a stroke, his face cycling through every shade of red and purple in the spectrum. Mom had gone completely pale and was swaying slightly in her chair. Then Mike, bless his professional soul, decided to add his own commentary to the moment. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced into the microphone, let's hear it for Patrick, the man who proves that real success isn't about what you achieve for yourself. It's about how you lift up the people around you. The crowd erupted again, even louder this time. People were on their feet, shouting congratulations, raising their glasses in toasts that felt genuine and heartfelt in a way my parents' speech never had. I saw several of my parents' friends looking at them with raised eyebrows, clearly doing mental math and reaching uncomfortable conclusions. That's when Mom fainted. She just toppled backward off her chair like a tree falling, landing on the hardwood floor with a thud that somehow managed to be audible over the applause and cheering. Her champagne glass flew out of her hand, spraying the nearby guests with Dom Perignon and adding to the chaos. Dad's purple face went white in an instant as he dropped to his knees beside her, his own glass shattering as it hit the floor. Call 911, he shouted, though it was completely unnecessary. Mom was already coming around, her eyes fluttering open as the applause died down and people crowded around to help. I'm okay, she mumbled, trying to sit up and failing. The room got very hot. The EMTs arrived about 10 minutes later, right as Mom was fully conscious and protesting that she didn't need medical attention. They checked her vitals, asked about her medical history, and determined that she'd fainted from shock and embarrassment rather than any underlying medical condition. Blood pressure is a little elevated, but that's probably from stress, the lead EMT explained to Dad. She should be fine, but I'd recommend she take it easy for the rest of the evening. The damage, however, was already done. The entire reception, 100 guests, including family, friends, co-workers, and business associates, had witnessed the family's financial benefactor watch his mother collapse after being publicly exposed as ungrateful and manipulative. Sarah's father approached our table while the EMTs were packing up their equipment. Son, he said quietly, putting a firm hand on my shoulder, I want you to know that if you ever need anything, and I mean anything, you call me first. That display was the most shameful thing I've ever witnessed at a family gathering. Sarah's mother was more direct. She walked straight up to my mother, who was sitting in a folding chair sipping water and trying to recover her composure. You should be ashamed of yourself, she said, in a voice that carried just far enough for the nearby tables to hear. That boy has been supporting your family for years, and you couldn't even mention his name in a speech at his own wedding. But one of my aunts, Dad's sister Patricia, who'd always been the most straightforward person in our extended family, came over to our table once the EMT excitement had died down. Patrick, she said, I had no idea you'd been helping them out financially. Richard never mentioned it. If I'd known. She shook her head. I'm proud of you. Your parents raised a good man, even if they don't seem to realize it. The rest of the reception was, well, surreal would be the best word for it. My parents left early, Dad helping Mom to their car, while she claimed she needed to rest and recover from her episode. Jake and Emma tried to act like nothing had happened, making awkward conversation with other guests and desperately trying to change the subject whenever anyone brought up Sarah's revelations. But the story had legs. People wanted details. They wanted to know if the numbers Sarah had mentioned were accurate, how long this had been going on, why my parents had never acknowledged my help. Several of my dad's business associates cornered him before he could escape, asking pointed questions about family finances and obligations. Jake's wife, Amanda, looked mortified when she realized that her wedding the previous year had been partially funded by her brother-in-law's generosity, not her in-laws' financial success. Emma kept shooting me confused looks, like she was trying to figure out if she should be grateful or angry. I spent most of the rest of the reception answering questions and accepting congratulations. Not for getting married, which was supposed to be the point of the evening, but for being a dedicated son and brother who'd quietly supported his family for years. The weirdest part was how many people told me they'd suspected something like this was going on. My dad's brother mentioned that he'd always wondered how my parents could afford their lifestyle on dad's income. One of Mom's coworkers said she thought it was strange that they never seemed worried about money, despite dad's occasional complaints about slow sales periods. "We just figured Richard had made some good investments," she said. "We never imagined—" Sarah and I finally got a few minutes alone around 10 p.m., after the cake cutting and most of the formal reception activities. We stepped outside onto the inn's garden patio, where string lights created a romantic atmosphere that felt incongruous with the evening's drama. "Any regrets?" she asked, slipping her hand into mine. I thought about it for a moment. The humiliation, the family crisis, the awkwardness that would probably follow us for years. Then I thought about 5 years of being taken for granted, of watching my parents praise their other children while treating me like a walking ATM. "Only one," I said. "I should have done it myself years ago." We left for our honeymoon in Tuscany the next morning, and for 2 wonderful weeks, we drank wine, ate incredible food, explored medieval villages, and didn't think about family drama once. It was exactly the reset we needed. Time to focus on being newlyweds instead of the children of dysfunctional parents. When we got back, reality was waiting for us like a patient predator. My voicemail was full. Text messages crowded my phone. Emails filled my inbox. The wedding revelations had apparently dominated my family's life for the entire 2 weeks we were gone. "Dad, we need to talk immediately. What Sarah did was completely inappropriate and has caused serious problems in the family." Jake, "Dude, why didn't you ever tell me about the money situation? I feel like an ass." Emma, "Are you seriously trying to make Mom and Dad look bad at your own wedding? That was so selfish." Mom, "I'm still recovering from the embarrassment. How could you let her humiliate us like that in front of everyone?" Extended family members had opinions too. Some were supportive, others were critical, and a few seemed to be enjoying the drama more than they should have been. But the most interesting messages came from my parents' social circle, the people they'd been trying so hard to impress for all these years. Apparently, the story had spread through their suburban bubble like wildfire. Richard and Carol, the couple who were always bragging about their successful children and their comfortable lifestyle, had been exposed as financially dependent on the son they never mentioned. My dad's insurance office was buzzing with gossip. How much money had Patrick really loaned them? Was it true they'd never paid him back? What about Jake's wedding? Had Patrick paid for that too? Mom's real estate office was no better. Her co-workers had been at the wedding, had heard Sarah's speech firsthand. They were asking pointed questions about family dynamics and financial arrangements that my mother couldn't deflect with her usual social graces. Their country club friends, their church group, their neighborhood social network. Everyone wanted to know more about the family financial situation that had been so dramatically revealed. The most telling response came from my dad's brother, Uncle David, who called me directly instead of going through my parents. "Patrick," he said, "I owe you an apology. I had no idea what you'd been doing for them. If I'd known, I would have said something years ago. What happened at your wedding? Well, they brought that on themselves." He went on to explain that he'd suspected something was off with my parents' finances for a while. They lived beyond what Dad's income should have supported, never seemed worried about money despite periodic complaints about slow business, and had been vague about how they'd recovered from their financial troubles a few years back. "I thought maybe Richard had made some good investments he didn't want to talk about," David said. "I never imagined he was borrowing from his own son." But the real bomb dropped when I decided to do some research into their actual financial situation. Remember how I'd been keeping a detailed spreadsheet of everything I'd loaned them? Well, it occurred to me during our honeymoon that I'd never actually verified their financial claims. I'd taken their word for it when they said they were broke, struggling, living paycheck to paycheck. So I did what any person with access to financial databases would do. I looked up their public records. Property records showed they'd refinanced their house twice in the past 5 years, pulling out equity both times. The first refinance had happened about 6 months after I'd paid off their credit card debt. They'd taken out $35,000 in cash, supposedly for home improvements. The second refinance, 2 years later, had netted them another $28,000. Vehicle records showed they owned both of their Honda Pilots outright. No car loans, both titles clear. Dad's newer Pilot had been purchased with cash in 2019, right around the time I'd covered Emma's tuition shortfall. I also had access, through my work's financial services partnership, to request credit reports for debt verification purposes. What I found made my blood pressure spike. They had excellent credit. Not just good, excellent. Credit scores in the high 700s, no late payments, no outstanding balances on any credit cards. They were approved for credit limits that totaled more than my annual salary. In other words, they weren't broke. They weren't struggling. They had been using my money to maintain a lifestyle they couldn't afford while building up their own savings and home equity. The final piece of the puzzle came when I drove past their house one afternoon and saw a new Lexus SUV in the driveway. A quick online check showed it was this year's model, starting price around $55,000. They'd been crying poverty while making luxury purchases. I called my dad and told him we needed to meet, all of us, today. We met at a Starbucks near their house, neutral ground where they couldn't control the environment or the conversation. Mom looked nervous, Dad was defensive, and I was done with their bullshit. I did some research, I said, sliding a folder across the table. Interesting what you can find in public records. Dad opened the folder and his face went ashen. Inside were copies of their property records showing the refinancing, vehicle registration records showing the paid-off cars, and credit reports showing their excellent financial standing. You've been lying to me for 5 years, I said calmly. You're not broke. You're not struggling. You've been using me as your personal bank while building up your own assets. Mom started the waterworks immediately. Patrick, we can explain... Explain what? That you've been running a con on your own son? Dad tried to take control of the conversation, using his salesman voice. Now hold on. We never asked you to give us that money. You offered to help when we were in trouble. I offered to help with genuine emergencies. I didn't offer to subsidize your lifestyle while you lied about your financial situation. I leaned forward, keeping my voice level, but letting the steel show through. Here's what's going to happen. You have 30 days to start paying me back. I want a written payment plan with a realistic timeline and market rate interest. We can't afford, Mom began. Then sell something. Downsize the house. Get rid of the Lexus. Liquidate some of that home equity you've been building. Figure it out. Dad's face was turning purple again, the way it had at the wedding. You can't be serious. We're family. Family doesn't charge interest to family. Family also doesn't lie, cheat, and steal from each other, I replied. But apparently I'm the only one who got that memo. I stood up and put on my jacket. 30 days. If I don't hear from you with a concrete repayment plan, I'm taking legal action to recover the debt. Dad's voice was shaking with rage. You'd sue your own parents? Over money? I looked at him for a long moment. This man who'd raised me but never really seen me, who'd taken my generosity for granted while treating me like an afterthought. Try me, I said, and walked out. The payment plan never came. Instead, I got a series of increasingly desperate phone calls and messages. Jake called to tell me I was being unreasonable. They're getting old, man. They can't handle this kind of stress. Can't you just work something out? Emma was more direct in her criticism. You're tearing this family apart over money. Is that really what's important to you? Making Mom and Dad suffer? Even some extended family members tried to play mediator. Surely you can come to some kind of understanding, they said. They're embarrassed enough. Do you really need to make it worse? The answer was yes. I did need to make it worse. Because embarrassment isn't the same as accountability, and I was done being the family's financial safety net. 3 months after the wedding, I filed a civil lawsuit to recover the debt. It became a matter of public record, which meant their entire social circle could look up the case details and see exactly how much money they owed their son and how they'd refused to pay it back. The house went up for sale 2 weeks after they were served with the papers. Jake and Emma both tried to intervene then, calling to ask if I'd drop the lawsuit if they started making token payments. Too little, too late, I told them. They'd had 5 years to notice what was happening, and 5 months since the wedding to make things right. I'm not interested in token payments or family negotiations, I said. I want my money back, with interest, according to the legal judgment. If they can't afford that, they should have thought about it before they spent 5 years lying to me. The legal process took about 6 months. During that time, my parents sold their house and moved into a smaller condo. Dad traded the Lexus for a used Honda. Mom had to give up her part-time real estate job to focus on the stress of the lawsuit. Their social standing in the community was destroyed. Everyone knew about the family financial scandal now. It had been covered in the local paper's legal notices section, and gossip travels fast in suburban circles. The final judgment was for $127,000 plus interest and legal fees, totaling just over $140,000. The court ordered them to pay it back over 5 years with monthly installments of $2,800. They've been making the payments religiously ever since. Apparently, court-ordered debt is different from family obligations. As for the rest of the family dynamics, well, those have been permanently altered. Jake and Emma have both tried to maintain relationships with me, but it's awkward. They feel guilty about benefiting from money that came out of my pocket, but they're also resentful that I destroyed the family harmony. Jake's wife Amanda refuses to speak to me, apparently blaming me for the family drama that's made holiday gatherings uncomfortable. My extended family is split. Some relatives think I was justified in demanding repayment and holding my parents accountable. Others think I went too far by making it a legal matter and humiliating them publicly. I don't really care what they think anymore.